Right. So today, we're really going deep, huh? We're diving into exempted trusts in India. And, you sent over this this audit report format. It looks like you want to really get down to the brass tacks of these trusts from an auditor's perspective.
Yeah, these trusts they're fascinating, right? They're not just numbers on a page. They're about people's futures and making sure those retirement funds are handled the right way, ethically.
Yeah, and a full hour with you going through this. By the end, we'll be experts.
I hope so.
So, these exempted trusts, right? Companies manage their own employees' retirement funds. It sounds, I don't know, a little dry maybe at first.
Right.
But there's so much responsibility there, Ron.
Absolutely.
And regulations.
Yeah, tons of regulations. And it's people's futures, right? We got to get this right.
Exactly. Okay, to help us out, to really navigate this whole thing, we have expert speaker who knows pretty much everything about finance and auditing.
It's great to be here. Excited to break it all down.
Okay, so you sent us this document, the title, Audit Report under Condition 24A of Appendix A of Para 27AA of EPF Scheme, 1952. Now, I love details, but that's a mouthful. Could we maybe simplify that a little? What are we actually looking at here? What kind of audit is this?
Yeah, you're not wrong about the title. It's basically a format for a super specific kind of audit in India. So it's for exempted trusts, and these fall under the Employee Provident Fund Scheme of 1952. So think of it this way. Most companies in India, they have to contribute to a big central provident fund, right? It's run by the government. But some of the larger companies, they get permission to manage these funds themselves. They do it through their own trusts. And those are the exempted trusts. And this report, this is how you audit those.
Got it. So they're exempted from the usual, but that doesn't mean they're exempt from being, checked up on, right?
Oh, yeah, no.
Like you get to build your own playground, but the safety inspector is still coming. Right?
Exactly. And this audit report, that's the safety inspector's checklist. Making sure that these companies are actually playing by the rules, they're managing those funds responsibly. At the end of the day, it's all about protecting those employees.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, looking through this, I see something about a re-audit. Now, I'm assuming that's not just doing the same audit twice just for fun, right?
Yeah.
When would a re-audit even happen?
Yeah, no, you're right. It's not about double checking for the sake of it. So a re-audit, that happens after the initial audit. Let's say the auditor found some problems, some issues the first time around.
Wow.
The re-audit, that's to see if the trust has actually taken those corrective actions. They need to comply with the regulations. It's kind of like, a follow-up appointment, right? Make sure everything's actually on track.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. It's all about keeping those exempted trusts, on the right path.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, let's get specific here, right? This audit report format, it asks for a ton of details.
Yeah.
Right. I'm talking participating units, bank accounts, who's on the board of trustees. Why so much detail? Is this just like bureaucracy, or is there more to it?
Oh, it's definitely more than just red tape. You got to remember, we're dealing with massive amounts of money here. This is people's retirement, right? Their savings. And this level of detail, it's all about transparency, right?
Right.
Accountability. Imagine if it was your own retirement fund. Wouldn't you want to know, everything was being done above board?
Absolutely, yeah. So if I was the one running an exempted trust, what would be the biggest don't mess this up points from this audit report? What are the things I absolutely have to get right?
I think if you were running the number one thing, meticulous record keeping. Every decision, every transaction, it all needs to be documented.
Okay.
Clear as crystal. This helps you stay compliant, but it also builds trust, right, with your employees.
So it's not just about staying out of trouble. It's also about, showing that you're doing things the right way.
Exactly. And another key takeaway, you got to be a master of those regulations. They're complex.
Right.
And any misstep can have some big consequences. Think of it like, your playbook, right? You got to know it inside and out to win the game.
Okay, so no winging it when it comes to managing these trusts.
No.
All right, now let's dive into some of the specifics here. There's mention of a Form RM-6. Can you shed some light on that? What is that all about?
Absolutely. Think of Form RM-6 as a trust's autobiography.
Okay.
It's a statement of everything it does, right? Investments, expenses, contributions, benefits, paid out the whole 9 yards. And it needs to be signed off on, certified as accurate.
So if this form is the autobiography, then the auditor's like the fact checker.
Exactly.
Making sure the story holds up.
Exactly right. And then you've got this section for observations or qualifications, and that's where the auditor gets to say, hey, this isn't quite right. For example, if the trust's investments aren't aligned with the regulations, that's what they call it out.
Okay.
This is where things can get real. These observations, they can have some serious consequences.
This is starting to sound high stakes. So let's say I'm the auditor, right? I'm going through this. What kind of things would I see in those participating units that would make me take notice? What would stand out?
So the participating units, those are the individual companies, right? Or establishments that are part of this exempted trust.
Right.
You'd be looking at their financial stability. How much are they contributing? Are they following all the rules themselves? It's about making sure everyone in the trust is playing by the same playbook, right?
So even if the trust itself looks good, there could be trouble brewing, at the lower levels, right? With those individual units.
Exactly. And speaking of crucial details, there's the Board of Trustees.
Right.
The report dives into their composition, making sure it meets the legal requirements. It's not just checking names. It's looking at their decisions, making sure there are no conflicts of interest, things like that.
Okay, so it's about making sure the people at the top are, qualified, but also that they're acting with integrity.
Exactly.
It's a lot of responsibility.
It is. And there's this whole section on amendments to the EPF scheme itself.
Yeah. Now, why would that matter? If the overall scheme changes, why would that affect the audit of a specific trust?
That's a great question. You got to think of the EPF scheme as the overall rule book, right, for all provident funds in India. So if that rule book gets updated, those exempted trusts, they got to make sure they're playing by the new rules. And their auditor, they're checking if the trust has incorporated those amendments into their own rules. And if any changes they made were approved, by the right people.
Okay, so it's like making sure they downloaded the latest software update, right?
Exactly. Nobody wants to be running on that outdated system.
Right. Now, I'm seeing something here about the establishment's legal status.
Yeah.
Why would that be relevant in the audit? What's the connection there?
So think about it. Companies, they change, right? They might merge with another company, get acquired, maybe even completely dissolve. These changes, they affect their legal status, and that can have a domino effect on, their participation in the trust.
So it's like making sure the trust isn't holding a membership card for a company that doesn't even exist anymore.
Precisely. And the audit report is checking if any of those changes in legal status have been reported.
Okay.
And if they require adjustments to how the trust works.
Got it. Okay, so we've got the players, the participating units, right? We've got the rule book, the EPS scheme, we've got the referees, the auditors. What about the money itself? I'm noticing a lot about the trust's bank accounts in this report.
Right.
What's the auditor looking for there?
That's where the real action is, right? The trust's bank accounts, that's the heart of everything. The audit report, it wants to see every account, numbers, balances, the transaction history, the whole shebang.
It's like a financial CSI episode, right?
Yeah.
You're tracing every rupee to make sure it's going where it's supposed to go.
You could say that. They're looking for anything suspicious, right? Contributions not deposited, right? Investments made in things that aren't authorized.
Okay.
Expenses that don't add up. It's all about making sure that money is being treated with the utmost care, with integrity.
Okay, now I'm getting into the weeds here.
Okay.
Depository participant, DMAT account.
Right.
What are those? What role do they play?
So these exempted trusts, they're allowed to invest some of their funds in things like stocks and bonds. Mm-hmm. And that's where the depository participant comes in, or DT. They act as a middleman between the trust and the depository, which holds those securities electronically. Think of the DP like the trust's investment guide in the stock market.
Got it. So the DPs, like the investment advisor, and the DMAT account is like their online brokerage account.
You got it. And the audit report is making sure that they're working with a legit DP, and that DMAT account is being managed according to the regulations.
Okay. My brain's starting to hurt a little bit with all these terms.
I hear you.
I'm seeing constituent subsidiary general ledger account and SDS account.
Right.
So,
it's like a puzzle, right? We're putting the pieces together. Those terms sound complicated, but they're just specific ways the trust keeps track of its money. The constituent subsidiary general ledger account, it's basically a separate ledger for each participating unit.
Okay, so each company has its own little financial diary.
Exactly. It allows for detailed tracking of everything going in and out. And then there's the SDS account, which is short for subsidiary deposit account. Think of that as like a special account for specific purposes.
Okay.
Like holding funds for, certain benefits or investments.
So it's all about creating a system where every rupee is accounted for.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No loose change rolling around under the couch.
Right. Now, one more thing that struck me, this requirement for the establishment to post its annual report on its website. Now, that might seem like a small detail, but why is public disclosure so important here?
Well, think about it this way. If it was your own retirement money being managed by one of these trusts, wouldn't you want to see how they're doing? This requirement, it lets employees, regulators, even the public see how that trust is performing. It's all about the activity.
It's like saying, hey, we've got nothing to hide. Come on in.
Exactly. It's all about building trust and demonstrating accountability. The auditor's checking to make sure that that report is actually published online.
Okay, so this audit report really is like a deep dive into the inner workings of these trusts. We've talked about the structure, the finances, the compliance, everything. But what happens if the auditor surfaces and they've got a whole treasure chest full of problems? What are the consequences for an exempted trust if they're not playing by the rules?
Well, that's when things can get serious, right? The Regional Provident Fund Commissioner, the RPFC, they have a lot of power here. They're the watchdogs, making sure these trusts stay in line.
So it's not just a slap on the wrist if they mess up.
Not necessarily. The RPFC can impose fines. They can impose penalties.
Oh, wow.
In extreme cases, they can even take away the trust's exempted status. That means they got to go back to the standard government-managed system, and that's a big deal.
Yeah, no kidding. Okay, well, it's starting to become very clear why these audit reports are taken so seriously.
Yeah.
It's not just about, checking boxes. It's about people's futures, right?
Exactly.
Now, I'm curious about this section on amendments to the EPF scheme. Why is the audit report so focused on how the trust incorporates these changes? It seems like a lot of work to stay on top of every single update.
Well, remember, the EPF scheme, it's the rule book, right? For all the provident funds in India. So when that rule book changes, the exempted trusts, they've got to adapt their own rules. Think of it like updating your phone's operating system. You don't want to be running on an old version.
Right. You want the latest and greatest.
Exactly.
Okay, so the auditor's making sure that they're not stuck in the Stone Age, so to speak.
Exactly.
But does every single amendment need approval from the RPFC, or there's some they can handle on their own?
Not every single one. Some of them are minor, right? Little tweaks, don't need a big approval process. But any big changes, especially if they affect employee benefits, those need the RPFC's stamp of approval. It's like, getting a building permit before you do any major renovations.
Okay, so it's a balance, right, between flexibility and oversight. Now, one thing that really jumped out at me in this report is how much it focuses on the legal status of the establishment. Why is that such a big deal for the auditor?
Well, it's about making sure that the trust's records, they're accurate, they reflect reality. Companies change their legal status, right? Mergers, acquisitions, sometimes they dissolve completely. It's like keeping track of a chameleon.
Right. Companies go through all sorts of transformation.
They do, and the auditor needs to verify if any of those changes happened and if it affects how the trust operates. It's about having that clear and accurate picture of everyone involved.
Got it. Okay, so we've covered the players, the rules, the money, even the technology involved in these audits. But I keep thinking about the human element here, right? These exempted trusts, they're really about people's hopes and dreams for a good retirement, right? A secure retirement.
Absolutely. We can't lose sight of the human side of all of this.
Exactly. So for companies that decide to go this route, set up these exempted trusts, what are some of the ethical things they got to keep in mind? Are there any potential pitfalls they should be aware of?
You bring up a really important point. The ethics are just as important as the legal and financial stuff. I think one of the biggest things is transparency. Companies need to be upfront with their employees about how this trust is being managed.
Right.
How are the investments doing? What are the fees?
So it's about building a relationship based on honesty and trust.
Exactly. And employees have to feel confident that their retirement savings are being handled responsibly, ethically. Another ethical challenge is avoiding those conflicts of interest. Remember, the board of trustees, they've got to act in the best interest of the beneficiaries.
The employees, right?
The employees, yes. If a trustee could personally benefit from a decision made by the trust, that's a huge problem.
It's like that old saying, right? Caesar's wife must be above suspicion.
Exactly. Even the appearance of a conflict of interest can really erode trust.
Right.
And then you've got risk management. The trust should be aiming for reasonable returns, of course, but protecting that capital, that comes first.
Okay.
Making sure the fund is sustainable long-term, that's got to be the priority. Taking big risks with people's retirement savings, that's just unethical.
Yeah. It's like walking a tightrope, right?
Yeah.
Between growth and security.
Exactly. You've got to find that sweet spot. You want to maximize returns, but not jeopardize the safety of those funds.
Okay, now we've talked about it from the company side, but what about the employees themselves? What are some of the benefits for them in this setup?
Well, one of the big ones is the potential for higher returns, right?
Right.
If the trust is doing well with investments, that goes to the employees. Their retirement savings get a boost.
So it's like having a personal investment manager working for them, right?
Exactly. Another advantage is the potential for more tailored benefits. Remember, exempted trusts, they have more flexibility. They can structure those benefits, those payout options differently.
Right.
They might have early retirement options, disability benefits, other perks that you wouldn't get with the standard scheme.
So it's a retirement plan customized for their specific needs.
Precisely. A much more personalized approach that can really meet those needs.
Okay, now that all sounds pretty good. But I have to ask, are there any downsides for employees in this kind of setup? What are the risks they should be aware of?
That's a really good question. I mean, there are definitely potential advantages, but there are also, pitfalls. One of the biggest ones is transparency, right? If the company isn't being upfront, honest about how that trust is being managed, the employees are going to feel left out. They're in the dark about their own retirement.
It's like being told, trust us, your money's safe, but you don't have any proof, right? No visibility. That could be a little unnerving.
It can. A lack of transparency, that breeds mistrust and anxiety. Employees need to feel confident that they can, get information, ask questions about their money. And another risk is just mismanagement, right? Most exempted trusts, they're run well, responsibly, but there's always a chance of mistakes, negligence, even intentional wrongdoing.
So like any investment, there's some risk involved.
Absolutely. And because we're talking about retirement, the stakes are even higher. Employees, they need to be aware of these potential downsides and, do their homework, make sure they feel good about how that trust is being managed.
Now we've explored the technical stuff, the benefits, the risks, but let's not forget the ethical side of this. We touched on this earlier, but it's worth repeating, right? When companies choose to manage their employees' retirement funds this way with these exempted trusts, they're taking on a huge responsibility.
They absolutely are. This is not just managing numbers in a spreadsheet. This is about people's hopes, their dreams for a secure future.
Exactly. So what are some of the ethical principles that should guide them in this? What are the most important things to keep in mind?
Well, transparency, like we said, that's huge. Open communication, clear reporting, making information available, that's essential for building trust.
Right. It's about being open, letting them see how things work.
Exactly. And another key principle is avoiding those conflicts of interest, right? The board of trustees needs to be acting solely in the best interests of the beneficiaries, the employees. Any situation where a trustee could profit from a decision, that's a huge problem.
So it's like, first, do no harm. Right?
Yeah.
The Hippocratic oath for financial folks.
Exactly. And then there's prudence, right? The trust has to invest wisely, manage risks responsibly, and safeguard that capital. They shouldn't be gambling with people's retirement, chasing risky returns.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's about being a steward of the future, right? Making sure those funds are there when people need them.
Precisely. It's a big responsibility, and ethics should always be guiding those decisions. Now, I think it's important to zoom out a little bit here. Think about the bigger picture.
Oh, right.
These exempted trusts, they have social implications, right? We've been talking about the company, the employees, but what about society as a whole?
That's interesting. Yeah. What are the broader impacts?
Well, remember, that standard government-managed provident fund scheme, that's a big part of of India's social security system, right? It's designed to give workers some financial support when they retire.
Right. It's a safety net, right? So people don't fall into poverty in their old age.
Exactly. So when companies opt out of that and go with these exempted trusts, it raises questions about fairness. Are they contributing their fair share, to the overall social good?
Right. It's like they're taking a private path instead of supporting the public system, right?
In a way, yes. There are arguments on both sides, right? People who like exempted trusts, they argue that they give better results for employees, potentially.
Right.
Higher returns, more customized benefits. And they say it frees up government resources so they can focus on people who really need it.
So it's like a division of labor.
Right.
Private companies are taking care of their own.
Exactly. But critics, they worry this could create a two-tiered system, right? Where people working for companies with great exempted trusts, so they have a comfortable retirement, but the ones who depend on the government's safety net, they might struggle.
Right. So some people get a gold safety net and others are left with a rope ladder.
It's a valid concern, right? And it shows how important it is to find the right balance between individual choice and collective responsibility. Policymakers, they have to think about the big picture and make sure everyone has a fair chance at a good retirement.
Yeah. No, it's a complex issue for sure, and it shows how financial decisions, they can have these ripple effects. It's not just about the immediate transaction.
Exactly.
Now, as we go deeper in all of this, I keep thinking about technology, right?
Right.
How is technology changing the game when it comes to auditing these exempted trusts? Are there any new developments, anything exciting happening that we should know about?
That's a great question. Technology, it's changing everything, right? Auditing included. One of the biggest things is data analytics. Auditors now use really sophisticated software to look at huge amounts of data, find patterns, spot anything unusual that could be a risk.
So it's like a superpowered magnifying glass, right? It can scan through mountains of financial data and just pinpoint what needs a closer look.
Exactly. It lets auditors go deeper, see things they might have missed, and the audits they're more thorough, more efficient. And then there's automation. A lot of the routine tasks, data entry, reconciliation, all of that's being automated. That frees up the auditors to focus on the complicated stuff.
So it's like they have a robotic assistant,
right,
handling the grunt work.
Exactly. Not only is it more efficient, it also means fewer human errors. The results are more accurate and reliable.
That makes a lot of sense. And I imagine as technology keeps getting better, we'll see even more innovation, right?
Yeah.
Making audits even more thorough and efficient.
Absolutely. We're already seeing this shift towards real-time auditing.
Oh, okay.
So using technology to constantly monitor and analyze data instead of just taking those periodic snapshots.
So it's like having a constant pulse on the trust's financial health, not just checking, once a year.
Exactly. More proactive risk management. You can detect those potential issues early on. It's like an early warning system. You can see those problems before they become a crisis.
That's a game changer.
It is.
Okay, well, we've covered a lot here. The players, the rules, the money, the tech. But I want to bring it back to our listener, right?
Right.
If you're involved with one of these trusts, whether you're overseeing it, managing it, what are the key things to remember from our conversation today? What can you do to make sure you're operating ethically, responsibly, and, following all the rules?
That's the big question, right? Based on what we've talked about, I think the most important things are, number one, transparency. Be open with your employees. How's the trust being managed? How are those investments doing? What are the fees? Clear reports, answer their questions, create that open dialogue.
So build that relationship of trust.
Exactly. Second, those records, they need to be meticulous.
Right.
Keep accurate records of every transaction, everything. And not only does it help with compliance, but it shows you're committed to transparency.
Right. It's like keep your financial house tidy.
Precisely. Third, your board of trustees, they need to be qualified, ethical people. They need to represent the employer and the employees, give them clear guidelines, make sure their decision-making is transparent and accountable.
Okay, so the right people at the top, and they're acting with integrity.
Exactly. Fourth, stay up to date on the regulations. Things are changing all the time. You got to know the EPF scheme, any other relevant regulations. Get professional advice when you need it. Don't be afraid to reach out to the RPFC for guidance.
It's like having a GPS for the regulatory landscape.
Exactly. And finally, use technology to your advantage. Data analytics, automation, real-time monitoring. It can help your audits, make them more efficient, help you catch problems early.
So you have a whole team of high-tech assistants working behind the scenes, right?
Exactly. If you follow these principles, you can be sure that your exempted trust is operating ethically, responsibly, and in the best interest of your employees. That builds trust and financial security for everyone.
Okay, so we've talked about the company's view, the employee's view. But what about the wider societal impact?
Right.
Do these trusts have any implications beyond the company and the employees, the bigger picture?
Oh, absolutely. The impact of these trusts, it goes beyond just the individual organizations and their employees. They touch on bigger social and economic issues like fairness, inequality, the role of private companies in Social Security.
It's like dropping a pebble in a pond.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Those ripples spread outward.
Exactly. One thing that people talk about is what happens to the government's Social Security system. When more and more companies go with these exempted trusts, does that weaken the overall, social safety net?
It's like taking water from the public reservoir and putting it into private wells, right?
In a way, yes. People who like exempted trusts, they say they provide better outcomes, right? Higher returns, more personalized benefits, and they say it lets the government focus on people who really need that help.
Right. So it's a division of labor, kind of.
Exactly. But the critics, they worry about fairness.
Right.
They say this could create a two-tier system where some people have a really good retirement while others are left, with less.
So it could widen the gap between the haves and the have-nots?
Exactly. And that gap, that could lead to, social unrest, more pressure on the government, less social cohesion. It's a complex issue.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It highlights the need for balance, right?
Right.
Between choice and responsibility.
Exactly. They have to, think about this carefully, make sure everyone has a fair chance at a good retirement.
Yeah, it's a
Right.
complex issue, no doubt.
Yeah.
And it shows how, these financial decisions can have ripple effects, right? It's not just about the immediate transaction.
Exactly.
Now, as we dig deeper into all of this, I keep thinking about technology.
Right.
How is technology changing the game when it comes to auditing these exempted trusts? Are there any new developments, anything exciting happening that we should know about?
That's a great question. I mean, technology is changing everything, right? Auditing too. One of the biggest things is data analytics. Auditors are using really sophisticated software now. They can look at huge amounts of data, find those patterns, spot anything unusual that could be a risk.
So it's like a super-powered magnifying glass.
Yeah, exactly.
It can scan through mountains of financial data and just zero in on what needs a closer look.
Exactly. And it lets auditors go deeper, see things they might have missed before, and those audits are more thorough, more efficient. And then you've got automation.
Right.
A lot of those routine tasks like data entry, reconciliation, all of that's being automated. So that frees up the auditors to focus on the more complex stuff,
So they have a robotic assistant handling all the grunt work.
Exactly. It's not only more efficient, but it also reduces those human errors. So the results are more accurate, more reliable.
That makes a lot of sense. And I imagine as technology continues to get better,
right,
we'll see even more innovation, right? Making audits even more thorough, even more efficient.
Absolutely. We're already seeing the shift towards what they call real-time auditing.
Oh, okay.
So using technology to constantly monitor and analyze that data instead of just taking those periodic snapshots.
So it's like having a constant pulse on the trust's financial health.
Exactly.
Not just checking in once a year.
Exactly. More proactive risk management. You can spot those potential issues early on. It's like an early warning system. You can catch those problems before they become a full-blown crisis.
That's a game changer.
It is.
Okay. Well, we've covered a lot here, the players, the rules, the money, the tech. But I want to bring it back to our listener, right?
Right.
If you're involved with one of these trusts, whether you're overseeing it, managing it, what are the key things to remember from our conversation today? what can you actually do to make sure you're operating ethically, responsibly, and following all the rules?
That's the million-dollar question, right? Based on what we've talked about, I think the most important things are, number one, transparency. Be open with your employees. How's the trust being managed? How are those investments doing? What are the fees? Provide clear reports, answer their questions, create that open dialogue.
So build that relationship of trust.
Exactly. Second, those records, they need to be meticulous.
Right.
Keep those accurate records of every transaction, everything. Not only does it help with compliance, but it also shows you're committed to that transparency, right?
It's like keep your financial house tidy.
Precisely. Third, that board of trustees, they need to be qualified, ethical people. They need to represent the employer and the employees. Give them clear guidelines. Make sure their decision-making is transparent, accountable.
Okay, so the right people at the top, and they're acting with integrity.
Exactly. Fourth, stay up to date on those regulations. Things are changing all the time. You gotta know the EPF scheme, any other relevant regulations. Get professional advice when you need it. Don't be afraid to reach out to the RPFC for guidance.
It's like having a GPS for the regulatory landscape.
Exactly. And finally, use technology to your advantage. Data analytics, automation, real-time monitoring, all of that. It can really enhance your audit processes, improve your efficiency, and help you catch those problems early on.
So you've got a whole team of high-tech assistants working behind the scenes.
Exactly. If you follow these principles, you can be sure that your exempted trust is operating ethically, responsibly, and in the best interest of your employees.
Yeah.
That builds trust and financial security for everyone.
Okay. So we've talked about the company's view, the employee's view, but what about the wider societal impact? Do these trusts have any implications beyond the company and the employees? The bigger picture.
Oh, absolutely. The impact of these trusts, it goes way beyond just the individual organizations and their employees. They touch on much bigger social and economic issues, like fairness, inequality, the role of private companies and social security.
So it's like dropping a pebble in a pond.
Yeah.
Right? Those ripples spread outward.
Exactly. One thing that people talk about is what happens to the government's social security system. When more and more companies choose to go with these exempted trusts, does that weaken the overall social safety net?
It's like taking water from the public reservoir and putting it into private wells, right?
In a way, yeah. People who like these exempted trusts, they argue that they give better outcomes for employees,
Right.
Potentially higher returns, more customized benefits. And they say it frees up government resources so the government can focus on those who really, really need that help.
So it's like a division of labor, kind of?
Exactly. But the critics, they worry about fairness, right?
Right.
They worry that this could create a two-tier system where some people have a really comfortable retirement while others are left with less.
So it could widen the gap between the haves and the have-nots.
Exactly. And that gap, that could lead to, social unrest, more pressure on the government, less social cohesion. It's a complex issue.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It highlights the need for balance, right?
Right.
Between choice and responsibility.
Exactly.
Policymakers, they have to think about this carefully, make sure everyone has a fair chance at a good retirement.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, it's a complex issue. And it shows how, these financial decisions can have those ripple effects.
Right.
It's not just about the immediate transaction.
Yeah.
Now, as we go deeper into all this, one question that I keep coming back to is the role of technology. How is technology changing the game when it comes to auditing these exempted trusts?
Right.
Are there any exciting new developments or trends that we should know about?
That's a fantastic question. Technology is revolutionizing the auditing world, just like it is with everything else. One of the biggest trends is the increasing use of data analytics.
Okay.
Auditors are now using really sophisticated software tools to analyze these huge volumes of data, identify patterns, spot anomalies that might indicate potential risks or irregularities.
So it's like having a super-powered magnifying glass that can scan through mountains of financial data and pinpoint the areas that need closer scrutiny.
Exactly. It allows auditors to dig deeper, see things that might have been missed before, and conduct more comprehensive, more efficient audits. Another major trend is automation.
Right.
A lot of those routine audit tasks, things like data entry, reconciliation, report generation, those are now being automated. So that frees up auditors to focus on those more complex analyses and judgment-based tasks.
So it's like having a robotic assistant to handle all the grunt work, allowing the human auditors to focus on the big picture, the strategic thinking.
Precisely. And this not only boosts efficiency, but also reduces that risk of human error, right? Leading to more accurate and reliable audit findings.
That makes a lot of sense. And I imagine as technology continues to evolve, we'll see even more innovation in this space, right? Making audits even more thorough, even more efficient.
Absolutely. We're already seeing a shift towards what they call real-time auditing, where technology is used to continuously monitor and analyze financial data rather than relying on those periodic snapshots.
So it's like having a constant pulse on the financial health of the trust rather than just checking its vital signs once a year.
Exactly. This allows for more proactive risk management and early detection of potential issues, like having an early warning system that can alert you to those potential problems before they become, major crises.
That sounds like a game changer. Now, as we wrap up our deep dive into this fascinating world of exempted trusts, I would bring it all back to our listener. If you're involved in overseeing or managing one of these trusts, what are the key takeaways from our conversation today? What are some practical steps that you can take to ensure you're operating ethically, responsibly, and in full compliance with the regulations?
Those are crucial questions. Based on what we've covered today, here are some key things to keep in mind. First and foremost, transparency is paramount, right? Be open and honest with your employees about how the trust is being managed, how those investments are doing, what fees are being charged. Provide clear reports, answer their questions thoroughly, create that culture of open dialogue.
So it's about building that relationship of trust, that open communication where employees, they feel like they're in the loop and they have a voice.
Exactly. Second, meticulous record keeping is essential. Maintain those accurate and comprehensive records of every transaction, contribution, withdrawal, expense, everything. Not only does this help with compliance, but it also demonstrates your commitment to transparency and accountability.
It's like keeping your financial house in order so that everything is easy to find and understand if and when you need it.
Precisely. Third, ensure your board of trustees is composed of qualified, ethical individuals who represent both the employer and employee interests. Provide them with clear guidelines on their fiduciary duties and responsibilities, and foster that culture of transparency and accountability in their decision-making process.
It's about having the right people at the helm, people who are not only competent, but also deeply committed to acting with integrity and in the best interest of the beneficiaries.
Absolutely. Fourth, stay up to date on that ever-evolving regulatory landscape. Make sure you're aware of any changes to the EPF scheme or other relevant regulations, and ensure that the trust's operations are always in compliance. Seek professional advice when needed, and don't hesitate to reach out to the RPFC for guidance.
It's like having a GPS for the regulatory landscape, making sure you're always on the right track.
Exactly. And finally, embrace the power of technology. Use data analytics, automation, and real-time monitoring to enhance your audit processes, improve efficiency, and detect those potential issues early on.
It's like having a whole team of high-tech assistants working behind the scenes to support your compliance and risk management efforts.
Precisely. By embracing these principles and best practices, you can ensure your exempted trust operates ethically, responsibly, and in the best interest of your employees, fostering that culture of trust and financial security for everyone involved.
Now, we've talked extensively about the companies' and employees' perspectives on exempted trust, but I want to take a step back and look at the broader societal impact. Do these trusts have any wider implications beyond the immediate benefits they provide to employees and companies?
That's an excellent question. The impact of these trusts, it extends beyond just individual organizations and their employees. They touch upon much broader social and economic issues, prompting discussions about fairness, inequality, and the role of private actors in providing Social Security.
So it's like a pebble being dropped in a pond, creating ripples that spread outward.
Exactly. One area of discussion is the potential effect on the government Social Security system. As more companies choose to manage their employees' retirement funds through exempted trusts, it raises questions about whether this weakens the overall social safety net.
It's like diverting some of the water from the public reservoir into private wells.
In a way, yes. Proponents of exempted trusts argue that they provide better outcomes for employees, often of higher returns and more personalized benefits. They also suggest that it frees up government resources, allowing them to focus on providing a safety net for those who need it most.
So it's like a division of labor where private companies are taking on more responsibility for their own employees' retirement security.
Exactly. However, Critics worry that this shift could lead to a two-tiered system with those working for companies with generous exempted trusts enjoying a more comfortable retirement, while those reliant on the government safety net might face greater financial hardship.
It's like creating a system where some people have a safety net made of gold, while others are left with a flimsy rope ladder.
It's a valid concern, and it highlights the importance of finding the right balance between individual choice and collective responsibility. Policymakers need to consider the broader social implications and ensure that everyone has a fair shot at a secure retirement.
Absolutely. It's a complex issue with no easy answers, and it reminds us that those financial decisions often have ripple effects that extend far beyond the immediate transaction. Now, as we delve deeper into this complex landscape, one question that keeps coming up is the role of technology. How is technology changing the game when it comes to auditing these exempted trusts? Are there any exciting new developments or trends that we should know about?
That's a fantastic question.
Yeah.
Technology is revolutionizing the auditing world, just like it's transforming every other industry. One of the biggest trends is the increasing use of data analytics.
Yep.
Auditors are now using sophisticated software tools to analyze huge volumes of data, identify patterns, and spot anomalies that might indicate potential risks or irregularities.
So it's like having a superpowered magnifying glass that can scan through mountains of financial data and pinpoint the areas that need closer scrutiny.
Exactly. It allows auditors to dig deeper, see things that might have been missed before, and conduct more comprehensive and efficient audits. Another major trend is automation.
Right.
Many routine audit tasks, things like data entry, reconciliation, report generation, those are now being automated. So that frees up auditors to focus on those more complex analysis and judgment-based tasks.
So it's like having a robotic assistant handling all the grunt work, allowing the human auditors to focus on the big picture and the strategic thinking.
Precisely.
Right.
And this not only boosts efficiency, but also reduces that risk of human error, leading to more accurate and reliable audit findings.
That makes a lot of sense. And I imagine as technology continues to evolve, we'll see even more innovation in this space, right? Making audits even more thorough and efficient.
Absolutely. We're already seeing a shift toward what they call real-time auditing, where technology is used to continuously monitor and analyze financial data rather than relying on those periodic snapshots.
So it's like having a constant pulse on the financial health of the trust rather than just checking its vital signs once a year.
Exactly. This allows for more proactive risk management and early detection of potential issues. It's like having an early warning system that can alert you to potential problems before they become major crises.
That sounds like a game changer. Now, as we wrap up our deep dive into this fascinating world of exempted trusts, I want to bring it all back to our listener. If you're involved in overseeing or managing one of these trusts, what are the key takeaways from our conversation today? What are some practical steps that you can take to ensure that you're operating ethically, responsibly, and in full compliance with the regulations?
Those are crucial questions. Based on what we've covered today, here are some key things to keep in mind. First and foremost, transparency is paramount. Be open and honest with your employees about how the trust is being managed, how those investments are doing, what fees are being charged. Provide clear reports, answer their questions thoroughly, and create that culture of open dialogue.
So it's about building that relationship of trust and open communication where employees feel like they're in the loop and they have a voice.
Exactly. Second, meticulous record keeping is essential. Maintain those accurate and comprehensive records of every transaction, contribution, withdrawal, expense, everything. Not only does this help with compliance, but it also demonstrates your commitment to transparency and accountability.
It's like keeping your financial house in order so that everything is easy to find and understand if and when you need it.
Precisely. Third, ensure your board of trustees is composed of qualified, ethical individuals who represent both the employer and employee interests. Provide them with clear guidelines on their fiduciary duties and responsibilities, and foster that culture of transparency and accountability in their decision-making process.
It's about having the right people at the helm, people who are not only competent, but also deeply committed to acting with integrity and in the best interest of the beneficiaries.
Absolutely. Fourth, stay up to date on that ever-evolving regulatory landscape. Make sure you're aware of any changes to the EPF scheme or other relevant regulations, and ensure the trust's operations are always in compliance. Seek professional advice when needed, and don't hesitate to reach out to the RPFC for guidance.
It's like having a GPS for the regulatory landscape, making sure you're always on the right track.
Exactly. And finally, embrace the power of technology. Use data analytics, automation, real-time monitoring, all of that to enhance your audit processes, improve efficiency, and detect potential issues early on.
It's like having a whole team of high-tech assistants working behind the scenes to support your compliance and risk management efforts.
Precisely. By embracing these principles and best practices, you can ensure your exempted trust operates ethically, responsibly, and in best interest of your employees, fostering a culture of trust and financial security for everyone involved.
Now, we've talked extensively about the companies and employees' perspectives on exempted trust, but I want to take a step back and look at the broader societal impact. Do these trusts have any wider implications beyond the immediate benefits that they provide to employees and companies?
That's an excellent question. The impact of these trusts, it extends beyond just individual organizations and their employees. They touch upon much broader social and economic issues, prompting discussions about fairness, inequality, and the role of private actors in providing social security.
So it's like a pebble being dropped in a pond, creating ripples that spread outward.
Exactly. One area of discussion is the potential effect on the government's social security system. As more companies choose to manage their employees' retirement funds through exempted trusts, it raises questions about whether this weakens the overall social safety net.
It's like diverting some of the water from the public reservoir into private wells.
In a way, yes. Proponents of exempted trusts argue that they provide better outcomes for employees, often with higher returns and more personalized benefits. They also suggest that it frees up government resources, allowing them to focus on providing a safety net for those who need it most.
So it's like a division of labor where private companies take on more responsibility for their own employees' retirement security.
Exactly. However, critics, they worry that this shift could lead to a two-tiered system with those working for companies with generous exempted trusts enjoying a more comfortable retirement, while those reliant on the government safety net might face greater financial hardship.
It's like creating a system where some people have a safety net made of gold while others are left with a flimsy rope ladder.
It's a valid concern, and it highlights the importance of finding the right balance between individual choice and collective responsibility. Policymakers need to consider the broader social implications and ensure that everyone has a fair shot at a secure retirement.
Absolutely. It's a complex issue with no easy answers.
Yeah.
And it reminds us that those financial decisions often have ripple effects that extend far beyond the immediate transaction. Now, as we delve deeper into this complex landscape, one question that keeps coming up is the role of technology. How is technology changing the game when it comes to auditing these exempted trusts? Are there any exciting new developments or trends that we should know about?
That's a fantastic question. Technology is revolutionizing the auditing world, just like it's transforming every other industry. One of the biggest trends is the increasing use of data analytics. Auditors are now using sophisticated software tools to analyze these huge volumes of data, identify patterns, and spot anomalies that might indicate potential risks or irregularities.
So it's like having a superpowered magnifying glass that can scan through mountains of financial data and pinpoint the areas that need closer scrutiny.
Exactly. It allows auditors to dig deeper, see things that might have been missed before, and conduct more comprehensive and efficient audits. Another major trend is automation.
Right.
Many routine audit tasks like data entry, reconciliation, report generation are now being automated. So that frees up auditors to focus on more complex analysis and judgment-based tasks.
So it's like having a robotic assistant handling the grunt work, allowing the human auditors to focus on the big picture and the strategic thinking.
Precisely. And this not only boosts efficiency, but also reduces the risk of human error, leading to more accurate and reliable audit findings.
That makes a lot of sense. And I imagine as technology continues to evolve, we'll see even more innovation in this space, making audits even more thorough and efficient.
Absolutely. We're already seeing a shift toward what they call real-time auditing.
Oh, okay.
Where technology is used to continuously monitor and analyze financial data rather than relying on periodic snapshots.
So it's like having a constant pulse on the financial health of the trust rather than just checking its vital signs once a year.
Exactly. This allows for more proactive risk management and early detection of potential issues. It's like having an early warning system that can alert you to potential problems before they become major crises.
That sounds like a game changer. Now, as we wrap up our deep dive into this fascinating world of exempted trusts, I want to bring it all back to our listener. If you're involved in overseeing or managing one of these trusts, what are the key takeaways from our conversation today? What are some practical steps that you can take to ensure that you're operating ethically, responsibly, and in full compliance with the regulations?
Those are crucial questions. Based on what we've covered today, here are some key things to keep in mind. First and foremost, transparency is paramount. Be open and honest with your employees about how the trust is being managed, how the investments are doing, what fees are being charged. Provide clear reports, answer their questions thoroughly, and create that culture of open dialogue.
So it's about building that relationship of trust and open communication where employees feel like they're in the loop and they have a voice.
Exactly. Second, meticulous record keeping is essential. Maintain those accurate and comprehensive records of every transaction, contribution, withdrawal, expense, everything. Not only does this help with compliance, but it also demonstrates your commitment to transparency and accountability.
It's like keeping your financial house in order so that everything is easy to find and understand if and when you need it.
Precisely. Third, ensure your board of trustees is composed of qualified, ethical individuals who represent both the employer and employee interests. Provide them with clear guidelines on their fiduciary duties and responsibilities, and foster that culture of transparency and accountability in their decision-making process.
It's about having the right people at the helm, people who are not only competent but also deeply committed to acting with integrity and in the best interests of the beneficiaries.
Absolutely. Fourth, stay up to date on that ever-evolving regulatory landscape. Make sure you're aware of any changes to the EPF scheme or other relevant regulations, and ensure the trust's operations are always in compliance. Seek professional advice when needed, and don't hesitate to reach out to the RPFC for guidance.
It's like having a GPS for the regulatory landscape, making sure you're always on the right track.
Exactly. And finally, embrace the power of technology. Use data analytics, automation, real-time monitoring, all of that to enhance your audit processes, improve efficiency, and detect potential issues early on.
It's like having a whole team of high-tech assistants working behind the scenes to support your compliance and risk management management efforts.
Precisely. By embracing these principles and best practices, you can ensure your exempted trust operates ethically, responsibly, and in the best interest of your employees, fostering that culture of trust and financial security for everyone involved.
Now, we've talked extensively about the companies and employees' perspectives on exempted trust, but I want to take a step back and look at the broader societal impact.
Yeah.
Do these trusts have any wider implications beyond the immediate benefits they provide to employees and companies?
That's an excellent question. The impact of these trusts extends beyond just individual organizations and their employees. They touch upon much broader social and economic issues, prompting discussions about fairness, inequality, and the role of private actors in providing social security.
So it's like a pebble being dropped in a pond, creating ripples that spread outward.
Exactly. One area of discussion is the potential effect on the government's social security system. As more and more companies choose to manage their employees' retirement funds through exempted trusts, it raises questions about whether this weakens the overall social safety net.
It's like diverting some of the water from the public reservoir into private wells.
In a way, yes. Proponents of exempted trust argue that they provide better outcomes for employees, often with higher returns and more personalized benefits. They also suggest that it frees up government resources, allowing them to focus on providing a safety net for those who need it most.
So it's like a division of labor where private companies are taking on more responsibility for their own employees' retirement security.
Exactly. However, critics worry that this shift could lead to a two-tiered system with those working for companies with generous exempted trusts enjoying a more comfortable retirement, while those reliant on the government safety net might face greater financial hardship.
It's like creating a system where some people have a safety net made of gold, while others are left with a flimsy rope ladder.
It's a valid concern, and it highlights the importance of finding the right balance between individual choice and collective responsibility. Policymakers need to consider the broader social implications and ensure that everyone has a fair shot at a secure retirement.
Absolutely. It's a complex issue with no easy answers, and it reminds us that those financial decisions often have ripple effects that extend far beyond the immediate transaction. Now,
Yeah.
as we delve deeper into this complex landscape, one question that keeps coming up is the role of technology. How is technology changing the game when it comes to auditing these exempted trusts? Are there any exciting new developments or trends that we should know about?
That's a fantastic question. Technology is revolutionizing the auditing world, just like it's transforming every other industry. One of the biggest trends is the increasing use of data analytics. Auditors are now using sophisticated software tools to analyze these huge volumes of data, identify patterns, and spot anomalies that might indicate potential risks or irregularity.
So it's like having a superpowered magnifying glass that can scan through mountains of financial data and pinpoint the areas that need closer scrutiny.
Exactly. It allows auditors to dig deeper, see things that might have been missed before, and conduct more comprehensive and efficient audits. Another major trend is automation.
Right.
Many routine audit tasks like data entry, reconciliation, report generation, all those are being automated, so that freeing up the auditors to focus on more complex analysis and judgment-based tasks.
So that's like having a robotic assistant handling the grunt work. It lets the human auditors focus on the big picture, the strategic thinking.
Precisely. And this not only boosts efficiency, but also reduces the risk of human error, leading to more accurate and reliable audit findings.
That makes a lot of sense. And I imagine as technology continues to evolve, we'll see even more innovation in this space, making audits even more thorough and efficient.
Absolutely. We're already seeing a shift toward what they call real-time auditing.
Oh, okay.
Where technology is used to continuously monitor and analyze financial data rather than relying on those periodic snapshots.
So it's like having a constant pulse on the financial health of the trust rather than just checking its vital signs once a year.
Exactly. This allows for more proactive risk management and early detection of potential issues. It's like having an early warning system that can alert you to potential problems before they become major crises.
That sounds like a game changer. Okay, well, we've covered a lot of ground here from the nuts and bolts of this audit report to the ethical and social implications of these exempted trusts. But before we wrap up, there's one more piece of this puzzle that I want to examine. This audit report format, it specifically mentions that the establishment needs to publish its annual report on its website. Now, it seems like a pretty simple requirement, but something tells me there's more to it than meets the eye.
You're absolutely right. It's not just a bureaucratic checkbox. This requirement, it really speaks volumes about the emphasis on transparency and accountability in the world of exempted trusts. It's not enough for that information to be tucked away in a file drawer somewhere. It needs to be readily accessible to anyone who has a stake in the trust's operations.
So it's like they're saying, we're proud of how we manage these funds, and we're happy to show everyone what we're doing.
Precisely. It's about demonstrating a commitment to open and honest communication with the beneficiaries, the employees whose retirement savings are being managed. By putting the annual report online, they're getting everyone a clear window into how their money's being invested, how the trust is performing, and what fees are being charged.
It's like giving them a virtual tour of the trust's financial engine room. They can see all the moving parts and how everything works together.
Exactly. And that level of transparency is crucial for building trust and confidence. When employees can see that their retirement funds are being handled responsibly and ethically, it reinforces their faith in the system and gives them peace of mind.
It's like building a bridge of understanding between the trust management and the people whose futures really depend on its success.
Absolutely. And it's not just about the employees themselves. This public disclosure, it also benefits other stakeholders, such as regulators, industry analysts, even potential investors. It allows them to scrutinize the trust's operations, assess its financial health, and compare its performance to other trusts in the industry.
So it creates a level playing field of information where everyone has access to the same data. No one's left in the dark.
Exactly. This transparency promotes accountability because the trust knows that its actions are being watched and evaluated by a wider audience.
Right.
And that scrutiny, it encourages responsible behavior and adherence to those highest ethical standards.
It's like having a whole community of watchdogs making sure that the trust stays on the straight and narrow.
Precisely. And the auditors, they play a key role in verifying that this transparency is upheld. They check to make sure that annual report has been published online as required, that it's easily accessible, and that it contains all the necessary information in a clear and understandable format.
So it's not just about ticking a box. It's about making sure that the spirit of transparency is truly embedded in the trust's operations.
Exactly. It's about fostering a culture of openness, accountability, and trust, where information flows freely and stakeholders feel confident that their interests are being protected.
That's a powerful message, and it resonates far beyond the world of finance. Transparency is essential for building trust in any relationship, whether it's between a company and its employees, the government and its citizens, or even individuals in their personal lives.
I couldn't agree more. Transparency is the foundation of a healthy and vibrant society.
Well said. Well, expert speaker, this has been an incredibly insightful deep dive into the world of exempted trusts. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us today.
It's been my pleasure. I always enjoy delving into these complex topics and shedding light on the inner workings of these important financial mechanisms.
And to our listener, thank you for joining us on this journey of discovery. We hope you've gained a deeper understanding of the intricacies of exempted trusts, the crucial role that they play in India's retirement savings landscape, and the importance of transparency, accountability, and ethical conduct in safeguarding the financial well-being of employees.
Remember, knowledge is power. The more you know about the systems that shape your financial future, the better equipped you are to make informed decisions and advocate for your interests.
Wise words indeed. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep striving for a more secure and equitable financial future for all. Welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive. Yeah. This time, we're going to be looking at something that might seem a little dry at first.
Okay.
But trust me, it's going to be really fascinating. An auditor's checklist for exempt trusts in India.
Oh, interesting.
That handle employee provident funds, or EPF.
Yeah.
Now you might be thinking, why should I care about this? Well,
right.
If you're interested in employment and financial security in India, whether you're an employee or employer or just a curious citizen, Understanding these regulations can be really insightful. It gives you a behind-the-scenes look at how this major part of the Indian Social Security system actually works. So to kick things off, let's start with the basics. What exactly is an exempt trust in this context?
Well, it's basically a setup where certain companies, usually larger ones, manage their employees' EPF funds internally. Instead of sending them directly to the government-run Employee Provident Fund organization, the EPFO.
So they're kind of taking on that responsibility themselves.
Exactly. It's a big responsibility. And that means there's a lot of oversight involved.
And that's where our auditor's checklist comes in.
Right.
We're going to break down the key points, really dissecting what the auditor is looking for to make sure that these exempt trusts are operating by the book.
Yeah.
One of the first things that jumped out at me was the focus on enrollment and exemptions.
Right. Well, Section 17(1) of the EPF Act does allow for exemptions from certain provisions.
Okay.
But the auditor's main concern is making sure that everyone who's supposed to be covered by the EPF scheme actually is.
So no loopholes for excluding employees who should be included.
Exactly. We're talking about making sure all eligible employees, even contractual workers, are enrolled.
Oh, wow.
The auditor meticulously compares the company's payroll records with the EPF enrollment list, looking for any discrepancies.
So there's a heavy emphasis on documentation and transparency right from the start.
Absolutely. For instance, the checklist mentions Form 11, which is used to exclude specific employees from the scheme. The auditor scrutinizes these forms to ensure that the exclusions are valid and backed by proper documentation. Everything needs to be crystal clear.
No room for ambiguity. It sounds like the auditor's role is really about protecting the interests of employees.
That's a big part of it, yes. Making sure that their EPF contributions are handled correctly and their retirement savings are secure.
Now, once we know everyone who should be in the system is accounted for, the next big thing is making sure the contributions are being made correctly right.
Absolutely. Remittances and returns are a critical part of the audit.
Okay.
The auditor checks whether the contribution rates, which are typically around 10% or 12%, are being applied accurately.
Right.
This has significant financial implications for both employees and employers.
For employees, it's about ensuring that their hard-earned money is being invested properly for their future.
Precisely. And for employers, it's about avoiding potential penalties for incorrect contributions.
So what kind of specific things is the auditor looking for to ensure those contributions are in order?
They're scrutinizing everything, looking for any instances of missing contributions, where maybe money was deducted from an employee's salary but didn't make it to their EPF account.
Wow.
They also check for contributions that were posted to the wrong accounts.
Oh, okay.
And that interest and damages are calculated accurately according to Sections 7Q and 14B of the EPF Act.
It's a real deep dive into the financial records to ensure accuracy and compliance.
Yeah. And that's not all. The timely filing of monthly and annual returns is also a crucial area.
Okay.
The checklist mentions Annexure M, which seems to be a detailed report the exempt trust has to submit.
Okay.
It likely includes a breakdown of all the financial details related to the EPF contributions.
That makes sense. You can't just have these funds floating around without proper records and reporting.
Exactly. The auditor is meticulous about ensuring everything is documented and submitted on time.
So we've covered enrollment, contributions, and reporting. What's next on the auditor's radar?
Well, the next area focuses on something that directly impacts employees. Claim settlements. This is where the rubber meets the road in terms of employees accessing their EPF savings when they need them.
It's about ensuring that the system works as intended, not just on paper,
Yes,
but in real life when people are relying on these funds.
exactly. The EPFO mandates a specific time frame for settling claims, and the auditor uses Annexure N to track cases where there have been delays.
And delays in accessing your own retirement savings can be incredibly stressful, especially if you're depending on those funds.
Absolutely. The auditor's role here is to identify those delays, understand the reasons behind them, and ensure the exempt trust is taking steps to process claims promptly. They also look into how the trust handles rejected or returned claims, verifying that there are valid reasons for rejection and everything is properly documented. Again, transparency is key.
So it's about accountability, making sure the system works efficiently and fairly for everyone involved.
That's right.
Now let's move on to another crucial aspect: the rate of interest offered by these exempt trusts on EPF funds. After all, this is people's retirement savings.
Yep.
And they need to grow over time.
You're right. The checklist specifies that the interest rate offered by exempt trusts must be at par with or higher than the rate declared by the central government. But the auditor doesn't simply take the trust's word for it.
Right.
They verify that interest is being credited to members' accounts every month based on their running balance.
It sounds like a very thorough process.
Oh, it is. And to ensure accuracy, the checklist mentions 3 test checks for this interest calculation.
3 test checks.
We don't know the exact details, but it likely involves random sampling of member accounts to double-check the math.
So they're really digging deep into the numbers, leaving no room for error.
Precisely. And speaking of digging deep, the auditor is also very keen on understanding how the exempt trust is investing those EPF funds.
Now, this is where things can get a bit more complex, right? We're talking about investment strategies and potential risks.
You're right. The checklist mentions a variety of investment avenues, including debt securities, equities, and what are called NAV-based instruments.
Let's unpack those terms a bit. Debt securities are essentially loans, right?
Yes, loans made by the trust to the government or corporations.
Right.
They're generally considered less risky than equities, which are essentially stocks and companies.
And stocks, as we know, can be a bit more volatile.
Exactly. But the fact that the checklist mentions equities suggests that exempt trusts are allowed to take on some calculated risk in their investment strategies.
Makes sense. Higher returns often come with higher risks. But what about those NAV-based instruments?
Those are a bit more complex. Think of them as baskets of different investments managed by professionals.
Okay.
They include things like mutual funds and exchange-traded funds or ETFs.
So instead of picking individual stocks or bonds, the trust invests in a diversified portfolio.
Right.
That's what all the financial experts recommend. Right?
It is diversification helps spread the risk.
So these exempt trusts seem to be following sound investment principles. But how do they decide what to invest in? Is there a set formula?
Well, we don't have access to their specific investment strategies, but they have to adhere to guidelines and regulations, and most importantly, remember their fiduciary duty to their members.
Meaning they need to act in the best interest of the employees whose retirement savings they're managing. No risky bets with people's futures.
Exactly. Their investment decisions need to be prudent, well-researched, and aligned with the goals of the EPF scheme.
Which ultimately boils down to ensuring that people have a decent nest egg when they retire.
That's the goal.
And that brings us to one of the most interesting parts of this checklist.
Okay.
The emphasis on compensating for losses.
Yes. The auditor is very focused on this. They're looking for evidence that the exempt trust has a clear mechanism in place to compensate for any losses incurred from their investments, whether those losses come from debt securities, equities, or those NAV-based instruments.
It's like a safety net, recognizing that investments can go wrong and ensuring that employees aren't left holding the bag.
Exactly. Now, the checklist doesn't specify who foots the bill for that compensation.
But it's safe to assume that the employer who set up the exempt trust might be ultimately responsible.
That's a likely scenario. And that creates a strong incentive for employers to choose their trustees wisely, to ensure they're making sound investment decisions.
Nobody wants to be on the hook for covering investment losses, especially when it comes to something as important as employee retirement savings.
It's a big responsibility.
So we've covered a lot of ground here, going through the auditor's checklist point by point.
We have.
But I want to zoom out for a moment and ask, what does all of this mean for the average person listening?
Right.
Why should they care about these regulations?
It's about understanding how a system that impacts millions of Indians actually works.
It's about transparency and accountability, knowing how your EPF contributions are managed and invested.
And it's about financial literacy. Even if the details seem complex, having a basic understanding of these regulations can empower you to make informed decisions about your own financial future.
So for employees, this is about knowing your rights and asking the right questions about your EPF.
Right.
And for employers, it's about understanding your responsibilities and demonstrating transparency in how you manage those funds.
Exactly. It's all interconnected. And understanding these regulations can give you a much clearer picture of how the system works, why it matters, and how it impacts you directly or indirectly.
Okay, so we've taken a deep dive into the auditor's checklist, exploring the intricacies of exempt trusts.
We have.
EPF contributions, investments, and more. But there's still a lot more to unpack. We'll be back after a short break to discuss some of the broader implications of these regulations and what they mean for the future of retirement security in India.
Sounds good.
Welcome back. We just took a deep dive into the specifics of this auditor's checklist for exempt trusts managing employee-provident funds in India. Now let's shift gears a little bit and talk about some of the bigger picture stuff. One thing that really struck me was just how meticulous the auditor is scrutinizing every single detail. It's like they're piecing together a puzzle to make sure everything fits perfectly.
It is. That's a great analogy. They're not just looking for surface-level compliance. They're trying to understand the intent behind the regulations and ensure that the spirit of the EPF Act is being upheld.
So it's not just about ticking boxes. It's about understanding those underlying principles of financial security and employee well-being that these regulations are meant to promote.
Precisely. And that requires a deep understanding of the context, the Indian workforce, the economy, and the challenges people face in planning for their retirement.
It's about connecting those dots between the technical details of the checklist and the real-life impact on people's lives.
Exactly. For example, remember our discussion about claim settlement delays? Those delays aren't just abstract numbers. They represent real people waiting for access to funds that they desperately need. The auditor's focus on timely settlements is about ensuring that the system works efficiently and fairly for everyone.
It's a reminder that behind all these regulations and procedures are human stories.
Absolutely. And those stories highlight the importance of having a robust and reliable social security system in place.
Speaking of which, what are some of the broader implications of these regulations for the social security system in India?
Well, one key implication is the emphasis on trust. The very fact that these are called exempt trusts implies a certain level of faith in the companies managing these funds.
But as we've seen, that trust isn't blind. It's built on a foundation of rigorous oversight and accountability.
You're absolutely right. The auditor's checklist is a testament to that. It sends a clear message that while companies may have the autonomy to manage EPF funds internally, they're not above scrutiny.
It's a system of checks and balances to prevent abuse and ensure that employee interests are protected.
Exactly. And that's crucial for maintaining public confidence in the entire social security system.
Because if people lose faith in the system, they might be less likely to contribute to it, which could undermine its long-term sustainability.
That's a valid concern. These regulations play a vital role in reassuring people that their contributions are being handled responsibly and that the system is designed to provide them with a safety net when they need it most.
So these seemingly dry regulations actually have a ripple effect on the entire social fabric of India.
They do. They reflect a commitment to social welfare and underscore the importance of financial security as a fundamental right.
It's fascinating how a document like this auditor's checklist can provide such deep insight into the values and priorities of a society.
It's true. And it reminds us that even the most technical aspects of governance can have profound human implications.
Now let's shift our focus back to the exempt trusts themselves. We've talked about their responsibilities. But what are some of the challenges they face in managing these funds effectively?
One major challenge is striking a balance between risk and return. In their investment strategies, remember, they're dealing with people's retirement savings, so they can't afford to be reckless. But at the same time, they need to generate returns that will ensure those savings grow over time.
It's a tightrope walk, isn't it?
It is. And the auditor's checklist reflects that delicate balance. They scrutinize the investment portfolio, looking for evidence of diversification, risk mitigation strategies, and mechanisms to compensate for losses.
It's about ensuring that prudence and responsibility are at the forefront of every investment decision.
Exactly. And that requires a high level of expertise and professionalism from the trustees who manage these funds.
Speaking of expertise, do you think the average employee in India has a good understanding of how their EPF contributions are being managed and invested?
That's a great question. And honestly, I think there's room for improvement in terms of financial literacy. While the basic concept of EPF is widely understood, the intricacies of how these funds are invested and managed might not be as clear to everyone.
So there's a need for more transparency and education on the part of both employers and the government.
I think so, yes. Empowering employees with knowledge about their EPF can lead to better financial decisions and greater trust in the system as a whole.
It's about creating a sense of ownership and agency.
Precisely. When employees understand how their EPF works, they're more likely to engage with it actively and plan for their retirement more effectively.
It's about shifting from a passive role to an active one, becoming informed participants in shaping their financial future.
Exactly. And that can have a ripple effect leading to a more financially secure and empowered workforce.
Now, thinking about the future, what are some potential trends or challenges that might impact the way EPF is managed and regulated in India?
Well, one trend that's already having an impact is the rise of the gig economy and the changing nature of work.
With more people working as freelancers or independent contractors, traditional employment structures are being disrupted.
Yeah.
How does that affect EPF contributions and regulations?
It's a complex issue. Right now, the EPF scheme is largely designed for traditional employment models.
Okay.
But as the gig economy grows, there's a need to adapt the regulations to ensure that these workers also have access to Social Security benefits.
It's about ensuring that that safety net of retirement savings extends to everyone, regardless of their employment status.
Precisely. And this is a challenge that policymakers and regulators are grappling with right now.
Another challenge, I imagine, is the constantly evolving investment landscape, with new financial instruments emerging all the time.
Right.
How can exempt trusts stay ahead of the curve and ensure they're making sound investment decisions?
You're right. The investment world is dynamic.
Yeah.
Exempt trusts need to have robust risk management frameworks in place and stay updated on the latest developments in the financial markets.
They need access to expert advice and the ability to adapt their strategies as needed.
Absolutely. And of course, the auditor's role becomes even more crucial in this context.
Right.
They need to be able to assess the complexity of these new investment instruments.
Yeah, and ensure that the trusts are operating within acceptable risk parameters.
It's a constant game of catch-up, ensuring that regulations and oversight keep pace with the ever-changing world of finance.
It is.
Yeah.
And that's why ongoing dialogue and collaboration between regulators, auditors, exempt trusts, and even employees is so crucial. It's about creating a system that is responsive to change and adaptable to the evolving needs of the workforce.
So it's not just about sticking to a static checklist. It's about embracing a dynamic approach that recognizes the complexities of the financial world and the importance of continuous learning and adaptation.
Exactly.
And that brings us back to the importance of financial literacy. The more people understand about these systems and regulations, the better equipped they'll be to navigate the changing landscape of work and retirement planning.
Absolutely.
It's been a fascinating deep dive exploring this auditor's checklist. It feels like we've really peeled back the layers of this complex system and gained a much deeper appreciation for how it all works and why it matters. I agree. It's easy to get lost in the details sometimes, but it's important to remember that these regulations are ultimately about protecting people's financial futures.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, before we wrap up, I want to circle back to one more aspect of the checklist that really stood out to me.
Okay.
That focus on loss compensation. We talk about how the auditor is very focused on ensuring exempt trusts have a mechanism in place to cover any investment losses.
Yes, that's a crucial point. Remember, we're dealing with people's retirement savings here.
Right.
The auditor wants to see evidence that the trust has a clear plan for making things right if their investments go south.
It's about providing that safety net, recognizing that even with the best intentions and the best strategies, investments can sometimes lose money.
Exactly. And the auditor wants to make sure that those losses don't ultimately fall on the shoulders of the employees who are depending on these funds for their retirement.
Now, the checklist itself doesn't go into detail about who specifically pays for that compensation, but I imagine it puts a lot of pressure on the employers who set up these exempt trusts.
It does. Choosing the right trustees, establishing clear investment guidelines, and having that robust risk management framework in place are all crucial steps for employers to take.
It's about demonstrating accountability and taking responsibility for the well-being of their employees.
And it also highlights the importance of transparency. Employers need to communicate clearly with their employees about how their EPF contributions are being invested and what measures are in place to protect their savings.
It's about building trust and ensuring that everyone is on the same page.
Precisely. And that trust is essential for the long-term health and sustainability of the entire Social Security system.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what are some key takeaways you'd like our listeners to remember?
Well, first and foremost, I think this auditor's checklist demonstrates the importance of thorough oversight and accountability when it comes to managing employee retirement funds.
It's a reminder that these funds are held in trust, and that those entrusted with managing them have a fiduciary duty to act in the best interests of the beneficiaries.
Second, I think it highlights the need for balance.
Okay.
Balance between risk and return in investment strategies. Balance between employer autonomy and regulatory oversight. And balance between the needs of individual employees and the broader goals of the Social Security system.
It's about finding that sweet spot where everyone benefits and the system works as intended.
Exactly. And finally, I think it underscores the importance of financial literacy.
Yes.
The more people understand about how these systems work, the better equipped they'll be to make informed decisions about their own financial futures.
It's about empowering individuals to take control of their retirement planning and to engage actively with the systems that are in place to support them.
Knowledge is power, especially when it comes to financial matters.
Well said. And on that note, I want to thank you for joining me on this deep dive into the fascinating world of employee provident funds.
My pleasure.
And the regulations that govern them in India. To all our listeners, we hope you've gained valuable insights from this conversation.
Yeah.
Remember, understanding these regulations is not just about compliance.
Right.
It's about ensuring a secure and dignified retirement for millions of Indians.
Yeah.
Until next time, keep diving deep. Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. You ready to roll up our sleeves and get into some serious financial detective work today?
Always up for a challenge.
All right, well today we're taking on provident fund audits. Not exactly the most glamorous topic.
Definitely not box office material.
Right, but you know what? Once you start peeling back the layers,
it gets pretty interesting.
It really does. It's like we've got this stack of intense questions, almost like an interrogation manual for provident funds.
A bit intimidating, isn't it? All those rules and regulations.
Yeah, but that's where the fun begins. Our mission is to decode those questions, figure out why they're so important, and, by the end of this, you'll be practically fluent in provident fund lingo.
You'll be able to impress your friends at parties.
Exactly. No more blank stares when someone brings up TDS deductions or off-market transactions.
You'll be the life of the party.
Now, to guide us through this maze of financial regulations, we have our resident expert in employee benefits.
Happy to be here. Provident funds might sound a bit dry at first, but when you realize they're all about safeguarding people's futures, it becomes a lot more engaging.
Absolutely. We're talking about retirement security here, folks, and that's something everyone should care about.
No doubt about it. It's about ensuring that people have a comfortable and dignified retirement after years of hard work.
Okay, so let's dive into those audit questions. One of the first things that jumps out is the heavy emphasis on provident fund investments. It's not just about putting money aside, it's about making that money work for you.
Exactly. This money needs to grow over decades, so finding that sweet spot between security and smart growth is essential. And that's why those questions about where the funds are invested and what kind of returns they're generating are so crucial.
Right, because we don't want to just stuff it under a mattress.
Definitely not. Those savings need to outpace inflation and keep up with the rising cost of living.
So let's get specific. One question asks about the percentage of the fund invested in government-guaranteed securities. Why is that detail so important? What's the thinking there?
Well, government securities are generally considered pretty safe, right? Almost like putting your money in a vault.
Yeah, the government's not going to disappear overnight.
Exactly. But even the safest investments have some level of risk. So this question is about ensuring the fund isn't putting all its eggs in one basket, even if it seems like a very secure basket.
Okay, so it's all about spreading the risk, even with those super safe investments. Now, there's another question that kind of threw me for a loop. It asks about something called embedded options. What are those exactly?
All right, so imagine you buy a share of a company, right? And it comes with a little bonus feature. The option to buy more shares at a fixed price in the future.
Oh, interesting.
That's an embedded option, a little right tucked into the investment itself.
So why would auditors be concerned about these embedded options? Are they inherently risky?
Not necessarily, but they can add another layer of complexity and potentially affect the investment's value. So the auditors want to know, are there any of these options hiding within the Provident Fund's portfolio? And if so, have they been properly accounted for?
It's like they're looking for hidden treasure.
Or hidden risks, potentially. They want to make sure everything is above board and that the fund's managers are on top of things.
Wow, I never realized how much scrutiny goes into these investments. It's like they're examining every single transaction with a magnifying glass. But beyond the types of investments, the document also digs into the mechanics of buying and selling. And there's this whole section on off-market transactions, which, to be honest, sounds a little bit shady to me.
Yeah, it's not necessarily shady, but it does warrant some extra attention. Think of it like buying a used car directly from someone instead of from a dealership.
You'd want to be extra careful, right?
Exactly. You'd want to make sure you're getting a fair deal That the car's history is clean, no hidden surprises.
So is that what those off-market transaction questions are about? Making sure the Provident Fund isn't getting ripped off.
You got it. The auditors are checking if these transactions were done on approved platforms, properly reported, everything nice and transparent.
It's like they're saying, show me the receipts.
Haha, exactly. They want to make sure everything is above board and that there's no funny business going on.
Okay, so transparency is definitely a key theme here. And speaking of transparency, there are a ton of questions about TDS deductions, timing interest payments, reconciling discrepancies. It's like they're obsessed with making sure every single penny is accounted for.
Well, remember, we're talking about people's hard-earned money here. Money that's been set aside for their future. So the auditors are playing the role of financial watchdogs, making sure that the fund is being managed with the utmost care and that every transaction is squeaky clean.
No room for sloppy bookkeeping.
Definitely not. Every I needs to be dotted, every T crossed. It's all about accountability and ensuring that the employees' savings are protected.
It's like those fund managers are under a microscope.
You could say that, but it's for a good reason. Remember, this is people's livelihoods we're talking about.
Absolutely. And speaking of those responsible for managing the money, it seems like employers aren't off the hook either. There's a whole section dedicated to their role in the Provident Fund process.
That's right. Employers play a crucial role in ensuring that the system runs smoothly. They're responsible for deducting contributions from employee salaries, depositing them into the fund on time, and even covering some of the administrative costs.
So it's like a partnership then. Both the fund managers and the employers need to be working together to safeguard the employee's retirement nest egg.
Absolutely. It's a shared responsibility, a collaborative effort to ensure that those savings are protected and growing for the future.
But what happens if things go wrong? Like, I see a question here about the employer compensating for any losses incurred by the fund. That sounds pretty serious.
It is. While provident funds are designed to grow over the long term, there's always a chance of losses due to market fluctuations or other unforeseen circumstances.
So this question is basically asking if the employer is ready to step in and cover those losses, protect the employee's savings.
Exactly. It highlights the legal and ethical obligations that employers have to their employees when it comes to provident funds. It's not just about following the rules, it's about acting as a responsible steward of those funds, even when times get tough.
That's a big responsibility.
It is, but it underscores the importance of these funds and the trust that employees place in their employers to manage them responsibly.
And speaking of challenging situations, there's this whole section on managing provident funds for international workers. I can only imagine how complicated that must get.
Oh, it definitely adds another layer of complexity. We're talking about navigating different countries' regulations, making sure contributions are allocated correctly, and coordinating benefits across borders. It's like a global financial puzzle.
Wow, that sounds like a logistical nightmare.
It can be, but it's a crucial part of ensuring that everyone's retirement savings are protected, regardless of where their career takes them.
It's like the world of provident fund is becoming increasingly globalized.
Exactly, and these audit questions reflect that evolving landscape.
So before we get completely lost in this global maze, let's take a quick breather and recap what we've learned so far. It's clear that provident fund audits are way more than just a routine checkup.
Oh, absolutely.
They're a deep dive into the intricacies of investment regulations, employer responsibilities, international complexities, and one thing's for sure, transparency is paramount.
Couldn't agree more. Every question seems designed to shine a light on the inner workings of the fund, ensuring that everything is done by the book and with the employee's best interests at heart.
And that's ultimately what matters most, right? Protecting those hard-earned savings and giving people peace of mind about their financial future.
Absolutely. And that's why these audits are so crucial. They act as a safeguard, a safety net, ensuring that the system is working as it should and that everyone is playing by the rules.
Well said. And we've only just scratched the surface. There's so much more to unpack in this document. So buckle up, folks, because our Provident Fund adventure continues.
Get ready for round 2.
All right, deep divers, ready for round 2 of our Provident Fund deep dives. Last time we saw how these audits are like a financial x-ray, revealing everything from those investment strategies to employer responsibilities. Now, how about we zoom in on that investment side and try to decode some of those head-scratching questions?
Sounds good to me. It's a bit like a game of financial Jeopardy.
Oh, I like that.
I'll give you the question, and you try to figure out why those auditors are so obsessed with it.
Challenge accepted.
Yeah.
So one question asked is about the percentage of the fund that's invested in securities issued by PSU/PSEs. Now, I got to be honest, I'm a bit fuzzy on what those acronyms even stand for.
Yes, the wonderful world of financial jargon. PSU stands for Public Sector Undertaking, and PSE stands for Public Sector Enterprise. Basically, we're talking about companies where the government has a significant ownership stake.
Okay, so kind of like a hybrid between purely private companies and the government itself. But why would the auditors care how much of the Provident Fund is invested in these semi-governmental companies?
Remember, it's all about assessing risk. While PSU-PSE securities are generally considered relatively safe, they might not be as rock solid as, say, government bonds. So this question is about making sure the fund isn't overly exposed to this particular type of investment.
So it's another layer of that diversification principle we talked about before, spreading the risk around to make sure the fund stays stable.
Exactly. Now, here's a tricky one for you. One question asks whether any PSU-TSE security has been miscategorized as a government security. Why would that be a problem?
That's a good one. It sounds like they're worried about someone trying to make an investment look safer than it actually is, like putting a fancy label on a generic product to charge a higher price.
You got it. That's exactly the kind of thing auditors are on the lookout for. They want to make sure every investment is accurately classified and that the risk assessment is spot on.
Okay, so no disguising those investments in sheep's clothing. Now, there are a bunch of questions about credit ratings, which always seem kind of mysterious to me. It's like a secret code that only financial wizards understand. Can you break it down for us regular folks?
Sure. Think of credit ratings as a report card for borrowers. They tell you how likely a company or government is to repay its debts. The higher the rating, more trustworthy the borrower, and the lower the risk for investors.
So a AAA rating is like getting straight, as in school, a sign of financial excellence.
Exactly. And that's why you see questions about whether the fund has invested in bonds with a minimum AA rating. They want to make sure the money's going into investments with a solid track record.
But even the best students can slip up sometimes, right? What happens if a bond's credit rating takes a nosedive after the Provident Fund has already invested in it?
That's where things get interesting. There's actually a question about whether the fund has exercised its option of exit within a specific time frame if a bond's rating gets downgraded.
Option of exit. So they have a way to get out of a bad investment before it drags the whole fund down.
Precisely. It's like having an escape hatch in case things go south.
That's reassuring. It seems like these audit questions are designed to anticipate every possible scenario, making sure the fund is protected from all sides.
Exactly. And they don't just stop at bonds. There are similar questions about commercial paper, which are short-term debt instruments. It's all about making sure the fund isn't taking on unnecessary risks, especially when we're talking about money that's supposed to be there for people's retirement.
It's like a financial safety net, carefully woven to catch any potential pitfalls. Now, one thing that really jumped out at me was the question about buying securities from the secondary market. Why would that matter?
Okay, imagine buying a used textbook from another student instead of getting a brand new one from the bookstore. You might snag a good deal, but you also need to be extra careful about the condition, right?
Yeah, you don't want to end up with a book that's falling apart.
Exactly. So when you buy on the secondary market, you're dealing with another investor, not the original issuer of the security. So the auditors want to know, did the fund do its homework? Did they get a fair price? There's even a specific question about whether the purchase was made at the average or highest yield to maturity on that day.
Okay, now you're just using fancy financial jargon to impress me. What in the world is yield to maturity?
Sorry about that. It's not as complicated as it sounds. Basically, it's the total return you can expect to earn on a bond if you hold it until it matures. So the auditors are checking if the fund got a decent return on its investment compared to what everyone else was getting that day.
So it's like making sure they didn't overpay for that used textbook. It's all about being a savvy shopper, even in the world of high finance.
Exactly. And speaking of being savvy, there are also questions about those off-market transactions we touched on earlier. Remember, those are deals done directly between investors, outside those regulated exchanges.
Right, like that used car analogy we talked about before.
Right.
So why all the extra scrutiny on these off-market transactions?
Well, they can be a bit less transparent than trades on a public exchange. It's like trying to figure out if you got a good price on that used car without any price guides or comparable listings. It's tricky.
You're at the mercy of the seller.
Exactly. So those questions are all about making sure those off-market deals were done through the proper channels, properly reported, leaving a clear trail for the auditors to follow.
It's like they're saying, show me your work.
Precisely. They want to see the receipts, the documentation, everything that proves the deal was legitimate and above board. And the scrutiny doesn't end there. The document also asks about things like the safekeeping of investments, maintaining detailed records, collecting interest and maturity payments on time. It's incredibly thorough.
Wow, they've really thought of everything. It's pretty impressive, actually, how much effort goes into protecting these provident funds.
It is. And remember, all this meticulous attention to detail ultimately benefits those employees whose hard-earned money is being managed.
That's a great point. It's easy to get lost in the weeds of these regulations, but at the end of the day, it's all about securing people's financial futures.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Now ready for the next round of Financial Jeopardy. We've got a whole section on managing those losses and expenditures that's just waiting to be explored.
Bring it on! I'm starting to feel like a Provident Fund pro. Welcome back, deep divers. We're in the home stretch now of our Provident Fund audit expedition. It's been quite a journey, wouldn't you say?
It really has. We've unearthed a whole network of rules, safeguards, and responsibilities, all geared toward protecting those retirement savings.
And if there's one thing that's become crystal clear, it's that transparency is the name of the game.
Absolutely.
These audit questions are like a spotlight, shining brightly on every corner of the fund's operations.
No place to hide.
And that focus on transparency becomes even more crucial when we're talking about managing losses and expenditures, right? Because even with the best investment strategies, sometimes things go wrong.
That's the reality of the market. It can be unpredictable, and even those seemingly safe investments can take a hit.
Exactly. So how do these audit questions address those potential pitfalls, those bumps in the road?
Well, one of the first things you'll see is a question about whether the fund got the prior approval from the RPFC before selling any security.
Okay, now that might seem like just another bureaucratic hurdle.
Maybe, but there's a good reason for it.
All right, I'm all ears. Why would they need special permission to sell an investment?
Well, to remember, provident funds, they're meant to be long-term investments. Selling securities too early, it can really disrupt the fund's stability and potentially lead to losses, especially if it's done impulsively or for the wrong reasons.
So it's like having a second set of eyes on those decisions, making sure they're well thought out and truly in the best interests of the fund as a whole.
Exactly. It's a check, a balance to prevent any rash moves that could put the employee's savings at risk.
Makes sense. Now, another question that caught my attention. It asks about any commissions, incentives, or bonuses that the fund might have received from financial institutions. Why would that be a concern for auditors?
Well, think about it. It's not unusual for financial institutions to offer these perks to attract big investors like provident funds. You know, it's like getting those loyalty points or cashback rewards on your credit card.
Oh, I see. So it's not necessarily wrong to receive those rewards, but the auditors want to make sure they're handled transparently.
Exactly. Those perks, they should benefit the fund itself, not the individuals managing it. It's all about avoiding conflicts of interest and making sure everything is above board.
It's like that saying, sunlight is the best disinfectant. By shining a light on those financial arrangements, it keeps everything clean, keeps it ethical.
Exactly. And of course, there are questions about TDS deductions on interest and maturity payments, making sure everyone's paying their fair share of taxes.
Right. Got to keep the tax man happy. All part of that meticulous record keeping and financial discipline that we've seen throughout these audit questions.
Now, let's circle back to those embedded options we talked about before. Remember those. Special rights or privileges that can be attached to certain investments.
Yeah, like a hidden bonus feature that could affect the investment's value.
Imagine buying a house, right? And then later you discover your neighbor has the right to walk through your backyard every day. That would definitely affect the value of your property.
Oh, absolutely. So are embedded options kind of like those hidden property rights, potentially impacting the value of the Provident Fund's investments?
That's a great way to think about it. They can make an investment more complex to value and manage, so the auditors want to know, is the fund properly accounting for these options? And have they taken any steps to mitigate any potential risks?
So it's like they're financial detectives, carefully combing through every contract, every agreement, looking for those hidden clauses, those potential pitfalls.
Exactly. And their investigation doesn't stop at the investment portfolio. There are also questions about the financial health of the company that manages the Provident Fund.
Now that's interesting. Why would the company's financial situation matter to the Provident Fund audit?
Well, think about it. If a company is struggling financially, it could impact its ability to contribute to the Provident Fund, or even to compensate for any losses, as we discussed earlier. So the auditors are looking for any warning signs, any red flags that might signal potential problems down the road.
It's like they're taking a holistic view, looking at both the micro-level details of the fund's operations and the macro-level stability of the company behind it.
Exactly. They're leaving no stone unturned in their quest to safeguard those retirement savings.
And finally, we come to that section on international workers, which we've touched on throughout this deep dive. It's clear that managing provident funds for employees who work across borders adds a whole new layer of complexity.
No doubt about it. We're talking about navigating those different countries' regulations, coordinating benefits, and ensuring compliance with international agreements.
It's a global financial puzzle.
And these audit questions, they help make sure all the pieces fit together smoothly.
Right, there are questions about those certificate of coverage procedures, making sure it's clear which country's social security system an employee falls under. And questions about settling claims under special provisions, recognizing those unique challenges of cross-border benefit coordination.
It's a testament to the globalized nature of work these days, and the need for Provident Fund management to keep pace with these evolving realities.
Well, folks, I think it's safe to say we've cracked the code on Provident Fund audits. What started as maybe a bit of a dry topic is turned into this fascinating exploration of financial regulations, investment strategies, and that intricate web of responsibilities that surround these crucial retirement savings plans.
I've certainly enjoyed the journey.
Me too. And to our listeners, I hope this deep dive has given you a better understanding of how these Provident funds work, why they matter, and the lengths that are taken to ensure they're managed responsibly.
Knowledge is power, especially when it comes to securing your financial future.
Absolutely. And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep asking those tough questions. Hey there, deep divers. Ready for another deep dive? Today, we're tackling something that might sound a little technical at first, but I promise you, it's full of those aha moments we all love.
Sounds intriguing. I'm ready to dive in.
All right. So we're talking about employee provident fund audits in India.
Ah, yes, those audits.
Yeah. Now, you might think audits, that sounds kind of dry, but trust me, this is fascinating stuff. We're basically going behind the scenes to see how these audits work, what they look for, and why it all matters.
You know, most people never even think about these audits.
Right. But they're so important. We're talking about the retirement savings of millions of people.
Absolutely. We need to make sure those savings are being managed properly, and that's where these audits come in.
Exactly. And the coolest part is, we're actually looking at an actual audit checklist.
Wow. The actual checklist?
Yep. Think of it like a detective's toolkit for financial investigations.
I like that analogy. A financial detective.
All right. We're going to use this checklist to uncover all the secrets of these EPF audits. So, what's the big picture here? What's the main goal of these audits?
Well, the core purpose is to make sure everyone is following the Employee Provident Fund Scheme of 1952. This is the law that basically sets the rules for the entire EPF system in India.
So it's all about making sure everyone's playing by the rules.
Precisely.
Okay, makes sense. So what are some of the key areas the audit covers? What are they actually looking for?
It's pretty wide-ranging. They look at everything from verifying withdrawal balances and unclaimed amounts to scrutinizing contributions for, well, specific categories of workers, like international workers and disabled workers, for example.
International workers. That's interesting. I imagine there are unique challenges there, making sure their EPF contributions are managed correctly.
You got it. That's why the checklist specifically asks auditors to check if balances withdrawn from the accounts of international workers comply with, let me see, paragraph 83 of the EPF scheme. It's all about making sure they're treated fairly when it comes to accessing their savings.
So it's like the checklist is this safety net, right? Making sure nobody's getting left behind.
Exactly.
Now, what about disabled workers? Are there any specific rules about their contributions?
Yes. The checklist ensures compliance with paragraph 82, which I'm guessing covers specific protections for them.
Gotcha. It's reassuring to know they're looking out for everyone.
That's the goal. Fairness and inclusivity.
Now, earlier you mentioned something called annexures. What are those?
The annexures. These are like the supporting evidence in our little detective case here. They basically provide detailed breakdowns and support the auditor's findings.
Oh, so it's not just a quick glance. They're really digging deep into the organization's records.
That's right. It's a thorough process.
I bet there are some fascinating stories buried in those documents.
I'm sure there are. Now, there's a whole section in this checklist that deals with what they call the cancellation or surrender of exemption.
Cancellation of exemption?
Yeah. You see, some organizations, especially larger ones, are allowed to manage their own EPF trusts instead of directly contributing to the government-managed fund. That's their exemption. But sometimes an organization might decide to give that up and transfer the responsibility to the Regional Provident Fund Commissioner, or RPFC. They're the government body that oversees the EPF scheme.
Okay, so it's like they're handing over the keys to the government.
Exactly.
So this section of the checklist is all about making sure that transition goes smoothly.
Precisely. It's a very delicate process, and they want to make sure everything is done by the book.
Gotcha. So can you give us a peek at some of the specific questions they're asking in this section? What kind of red flags are they looking for?
Well, for starters, did the organization properly notify the government about their decision to surrender the exemption? And have they settled all outstanding dues, like unpaid contributions or penalties?
Making sure they're leaving on good terms.
Exactly. It wouldn't be fair for employees to be left hanging with unresolved issues.
Right. What else are they looking for?
Well, the checklist also dives deep into the financial side of things. They want to know if they accounted for every rupee of employee savings, including interest and investment returns. And have they transferred all the necessary documents and records to the RPFC?
Wow, it's really comprehensive. They're not messing around.
Nope, they're leaving no stone unturned. We're talking about people's futures here.
I'm starting to get a sense of how important these audits really are.
They are absolutely vital.
This brings up an interesting question, though. If an organization is giving up their exemption and handing everything over to the government, you'd think they'd be extra careful to make sure everything is perfect, right? Why all this extra scrutiny?
You'd think so, wouldn't you? But even with the best intentions, mistakes happen. Or procedures might not be followed correctly. This checklist acts as a safeguard, protecting the interests of the employees regardless of what the organization does.
It's like having an independent referee there to make sure everything is fair.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense. It's all about accountability and transparency.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Now, I'm really curious about how they assess the financial health of the organization itself. That seems like a pretty important part of making sure employee funds are secure.
Oh, absolutely. That's where things get really interesting. This part dives into how the organization has been managing those EPF funds. They're looking for any instances where losses might have occurred.
Losses, you mean like from bad investments or something?
Exactly. It could be bad investment decisions, fluctuations in the market, even something like the delisting of securities.
I see. So they're checking to see if the organization has been a good steward of the employee's savings.
Precisely. And if losses are discovered, the checklist makes sure the employer takes responsibility.
So it's not the employees who have to bear the brunt of those losses.
Nope. The employer is expected to compensate.
That's good to know, especially considering that employees don't really have control over how their EPF contributions are invested.
That's right. And to make sure that compensation happens, the checklist requires something called a certificate about the financial health of the trust.
A certificate? What's that all about?
It's basically a document signed by an independent auditor, a third party, that confirms the organization is financially sound and can manage those EPF funds responsibly.
It's like a seal of approval from a financial expert, right? Reassuring employees that their money is safe.
Exactly.
Now, does the checklist actually say what this financial health assessment should look like? Like what criteria they use?
It doesn't go into specific details about the auditor's evaluation.
I see.
But it's safe to assume they'd be looking at the organization's investment strategy, their track record in managing funds, and their overall financial stability.
Sounds like a pretty thorough checkup.
It is. It goes beyond just ticking boxes. It's about making sure the organization is competent and responsible.
Right. So this independent audit, it's like an extra layer of scrutiny on top of the main audit, the one we're talking about with the checklist.
Exactly. It's a system designed to be really robust.
Yeah, we're talking about people's retirement savings here. It's serious business.
Absolutely. Every detail matters.
You know, going through all these sections, it's amazing how this checklist anticipates all sorts of scenarios and potential problems. We talked about international workers and disabled workers. Are there any other specific employee categories they focus on?
Oh, yeah, definitely. One section that caught my eye deals with something called forfeiture accounts and unclaimed amounts.
Forfeiture accounts. That sounds a bit intimidating.
It's not as bad as it sounds. It's basically about situations where an employee might leave a job before they're eligible to withdraw their full Provident Fund balance.
Oh, okay.
Depending on the circumstances and the company's policies, part of their contributions might be forfeited.
Forfeited.
Yeah, and that forfeited amount goes into a separate account. What the checklist does is make sure that process is done correctly and transparently.
So no funny business going on with those forfeited funds.
Exactly. It's about protecting employees' rights, even when they might not be able to access all of their savings.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, what about those unclaimed amounts? What are those all about?
Think about it. People change jobs, they move, their contact information changes. Sometimes they just forget about their Provident Fund savings, or they become, untraceable.
Right, I can see how that happens.
So the checklist requires auditors to track down these unclaimed amounts and make sure there are procedures in place to return those funds to their rightful owners.
It's like a financial scavenger hunt.
Kind of, yeah. It's a reminder that this whole audit process isn't just about numbers and compliance. It's about making sure things are fair and that people aren't losing out on what's rightfully theirs.
Yeah, it's really putting a human face on these audits.
Absolutely.
Earlier you said this checklist is like a detective's toolkit, and I'm really starting to see that now. All these safeguards and procedures, it's pretty impressive.
Yeah, we've only scratched the surface here. There's so much more to it.
I'm curious about that certificate of financial health again. You said it's signed by an independent auditor. What kind of expertise would someone need to have to make that kind of assessment?
Well, to really evaluate the financial health of an organization managing these funds, they need a pretty unique set of skills.
Like what?
Well, obviously they need to understand the EPF scheme itself, all the rules and regulations.
It makes sense.
But they also need strong financial skills, the ability to analyze financial statements, understand investment strategies, and assess the organization's overall financial stability.
So it's a pretty specialized role then.
Definitely. They need to be part financial detective and part legal expert, making sure everything's on the up and up.
And they have to be impartial too, right? They can't be swayed by the organization.
That's absolutely crucial. Their primary responsibility is to protect the employees, not the organization. They need to be a neutral third party, offering an unbiased opinion.
So their independence is really key to the whole process.
Without a doubt.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, I'm wondering about the logistics of these audits. How do they actually happen? Do auditors just show up at the organization's office with briefcases full of documents?
Well, I imagine it's a mix of on-site visits and reviewing documents remotely.
So they'd start by requesting a whole bunch of documents from the organization.
Exactly. Financial statements, contribution records, investment reports, the whole shebang. They need to build a complete picture of how the organization is managing the EPF funds.
It's like putting together a giant financial puzzle.
Huh. That's a great way to put it. And then based on what they find in those documents, they might do on-site visits to double-check things, interview people, see how things work in person.
It's pretty thorough. I bet technology plays a big role in all of this too.
Oh, absolutely. These days, auditors are using really sophisticated software to analyze data, identify patterns, and spot things that might have been missed in the past.
Like having a digital detective by their side.
Exactly. Technology makes them much more efficient and effective, which is good for everyone involved.
So it's a win-win.
Definitely.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about how these audits make sure organizations are complying with the rules. But what happens if they're not? What are the consequences?
Oh, the EPF scheme has teeth. There are all sorts of penalties, depending on how serious the violation is.
So it's not just a slap on the wrist.
Not at all. They could face fines, legal action, even lose their exemption status.
Wow, that's serious.
It shows how seriously they take this. The EPF scheme is a legal framework with real consequences.
I'm getting a real sense of how complex and detailed this whole process is. They're really thinking of everything.
It's really impressive. It shows how important India considers the financial well-being of its workers.
Yeah, it's not just about numbers and spreadsheets. It's about people's lives.
Exactly. These are people's dreams and hopes for a secure retirement.
Well said. We've covered a lot of ground today, but before we wrap things up, I have one more question. As we've been going through this checklist and talking about all the details and how it protects employee savings, it's really got me thinking about something.
What's that?
Well, this whole system, it's all based on the Employee Provident Fund Scheme of 1952.
Right.
That's like over 70 years old.
It is quite old.
And the world of work has changed so much since then.
Oh, absolutely.
So how can we be sure that this scheme and all these audits are still relevant today? You know, with the gig economy and remote work and everything.
That is an excellent question, and it's one that policymakers are thinking about all the time. The good news is that the EPF scheme has been updated many times over the years.
So it's not just stuck in the past.
Not at all. It's a living framework that adapts to new realities.
That's good to hear.
Yeah, they're constantly making adjustments to keep it relevant.
So what about these new ways of working, like the gig economy you mentioned? How does the EPF scheme handle that?
Well, that's one of the big challenges they're facing right now. They need to make sure the scheme can accommodate these new types of work.
It's like trying to fit a square peg into a round hole sometimes.
Exactly. But the goal is to make sure everyone has access to those retirement savings, no matter how they work.
And I guess the audits play a role in that too.
Absolutely. By carefully checking how organizations are managing those funds, the audits help to make sure the scheme's objectives are still being met, even as the world of work changes around it.
So it's like a feedback loop, right? The audits provide information on how well the scheme is working and where things need to be tweaked.
That's a great way to put it. They're essential for keeping the scheme up to date and effective.
This whole conversation has really opened my eyes to the importance of these audits.
I'm glad to hear that.
It's more than just numbers on a page. It's about protecting people's livelihoods.
Exactly. It's about making sure people have a secure and dignified retirement.
And it contributes to a sense of financial stability for everyone.
Without a doubt.
Well, I think we've done a pretty thorough job of exploring EPF audits today. Any final thoughts you'd like to share?
Just this. The next time you hear about retirement savings or financial regulations, remember that there are people working hard behind the scenes to protect your interests.
That's a great point. We often take these systems for granted,
We do.
but they're essential for a fair and secure future for all of us.
Couldn't agree more.
Well, that wraps up our deep dive into EPF audits in India. Thanks for joining us.
It was my pleasure.
And remember, you bring the source, we bring the deep dive. Until next time, stay curious. All right, get ready, because today we are going deep, really deep into some, well, let's just say it's pretty dense material. We're going to be talking about something called exempted provident fund trusts in India.
It's a mouthful, I know.
Yeah, it is. But particularly, we're going to be focusing on how these trusts are audited. And I know, you're thinking, provident fund auditing. That sounds like a real snoozer.
Maybe not the most exciting topic at first glance?
No, not really, but trust me on this. This is something that has a real direct impact on your retirement savings.
Absolutely. And after this deep dive, you'll know enough to really put your financial advisor through their paces.
Oh yeah, they'll be sweating. So we've got this set of annexures. It's kind of like, a super detailed checklist. And it's what the auditors actually use to make sure these exempted trusts are following the rules.
Making sure they're playing by the book. Managing your hard-earned money the way that should.
So we're basically doing some hardcore forensic accounting here. That's cool. But before we get too lost in the weeds, in all the tiny details, can you just back up a bit and tell us why this even exists? Why bother with all of this?
Yeah.
What's the point?
Good question. Just imagine, right? A whole system where companies get to manage their own retirement funds. On their own, pretty much. Minimal oversight. Sounds a little risky, don't you think?
Yeah, a little bit.
That's exactly where these annexures step in.
They're like the safety net.
Exactly. Based on actual laws, the Employees Provident Funds and Miscellaneous Provisions Act, way back from 1952, and the EPF scheme, also from 52, this provides that crucial legal framework to make sure everything's transparent and accountable.
So it's like a legal safety net for all of our retirement savings, right? Make sure nobody's messing around with the funds.
Right on the money.
But why so many annexes? There's tons of them.
Yeah.
Like they took the alphabet and said, how many regulations can we pack in here?
Well, each annexure has a specific purpose. It tackles a different part of how the trust operates. Starting with Annexure A, we're identifying all the participating units and branches, and then all the way to Annexure M, which tracks if those returns are filed on time.
So it's like a total audit trail. You can't hide anything.
You got it. Every stone gets turned over.
So let's start with that first one, Annexure A. It's like taking attendance, right? Making sure everyone's there.
Right. We need a roll call, but it goes beyond just names and addresses. Annexure A also needs confirmation that each and every branch is playing by the rules of the exempted trust.
I see. So it's like the first checkpoint, catch those potential problems early on.
Precisely.
Makes sense. And then we get to Annexure B, and this is where we start looking at the actual exemption itself, all the details.
You got it. Annexure B is all about whether that exemption is even legit. It tracks the notification number, the date it starts, any special relaxations that were given, and even if there are any proposals to get rid of the exemption or cancel it.
Okay, so this is where it gets really interesting for employees, right? What happens if, let's say a company says, you know what, we don't want this exemption anymore. What happens then? What protects our savings during that kind of change?
That is a fantastic question, and we are going to definitely dig into that more as we go through these annexures.
All right, looking forward to it. But for now, let's move on, see what's next. Annexures C and E. They both seem to be about bank accounts, which seems a little repetitive, to be honest.
It does at first glance.
Why list the same information twice? It seems a bit like, just bureaucracy for the sake of bureaucracy.
I hear you, but there's actually a very strategic reason why they're separate. Annexure C, that's all about operational bank accounts, the ones used for everyday expenses, the day-to-day stuff. While Annexure E, that tracks accounts where the actual investment funds are kept. Totally separate.
Oh, okay. So it's like having separate wallets, right?
Yeah.
One for daily spending and one for the long-term savings.
You got it. And this makes a ton of sense when you think about managing risk.
For sure. It's like putting up a wall between those investment funds and any chance of them being misused or spent the wrong way.
Exactly. Protection is key. Now, things get really interesting when we hit Annexure D. This is where we start to see the players, the people actually making those big decisions that affect our retirement money.
The people behind the curtain, huh?
Exactly. Annexure D puts that board of trustees under the microscope. These are the folks, both from the employer side and the employee side, who are calling the shots. It digs into what makes them qualified, their responsibilities, any potential conflict of interest they might have, and even how they get appointed or removed. The whole 9 yards.
So I'm curious about the power dynamic here. How do we know employees actually have a real say in what's going on, that they aren't just getting drowned out by what the company wants?
Well, that's where these self-declarations come in. Each potential trustee, they have to officially declare that they meet all the criteria, the eligibility requirements, and that there's no conflict of interest that can make them less impartial. So it's like weeding out any bad apples. Anyone who might be tempted to put the company's profits ahead of how well those employees' savings are doing.
It's all about checks and balances.
What about the big boss, the chairman of the board? How does that work?
Well, they don't just pick anyone. The EPF scheme, it's got specific guidelines on how the chairman is appointed, and Annexure D is there to make sure the trust is sticking to those rules. No cutting corners. Transparency is crucial here, and so is following the process every step of the way.
So these annexures, they really do try to cover everything. It's impressive. From those big, broad legal rules to the tiny, tiny details about personnel and finances. It's like building a fortress around our retirement savings, brick by legal brick.
I love that analogy. It's a fortress of financial security.
Speaking of bricks, what about annexures F, G, and H? They seem to be all about the employees themselves, right? Like how they fit into this whole trust thing. You got it. We're talking about the foundation of the whole system. Annexure F specifically draws those lines between different types of employees. You've got your regular employees, then contractual employees hired directly by the company.
Okay, so that's 2 types. What else?
Then you have your contractual employees, but they're hired through a contractor, not directly.
Yeah.
And lastly, there are your excluded employees. Now, what's super important here is that each of these categories, they have their own specific set of rules and benefits when it comes to contributing to the Provident Fund.
So it's not a one-size-fits-all kind of thing?
Not at all. A full-time employee who's been with the company forever is going to have a way different experience with the Provident Fund than, say, a consultant they bring in for a short-term project, or like a temporary worker who comes in through an agency.
Got it. So where do annexures G and H come in?
Well, they take those categories and say, okay, now let's get into the nitty-gritty. We need the full picture, a detailed breakdown of salary and wage info for every single category, especially for those where the PF contributions might not be, automatically required. It's all about making sure everyone is treated fairly and those contributions are calculated the right way.
This is a great reminder for everyone listening. Check your own employment contracts, people.
Yeah.
Understand your situation. Do you even know how you're classified? How are those contributions being figured out? It's worth digging into. Knowledge is power.
Couldn't agree more, especially when we're talking about your financial well-being. So we've talked about the players, the rules, the categories, but where's the money, right? How do these annexures actually track the cash?
Let's follow that money trail.
Annexures I and J, that's where the real action is.
Okay, break it down for us.
Annexure I zooms in on contractors and what they're supposed to be doing for their employees when it comes to the Provident Fund. It's all about verification, making sure those payments to contractors are happening and that they're, in turn, taking care of their employees' Provident Fund accounts.
It's like an extra layer of protection, making sure no money is slipping through the cracks.
You got it. We don't want anyone getting shortchanged. Now, Annexure J, this is like the grand finale of tracking those finances. It documents every single step of how that money flows. The wage months, the amount due to the PF, when the payment happened, any late payments, and even penalties that get tacked on for those late payments.
Wait, penalties.
Yeah.
So companies that are late with those PF contributions, they get hit with a fine.
Oh, yeah. And we're not talking about a slap on the wrist. We're talking interest charges under Section 7Q of that EPF Act we talked about earlier, and even potential damages under Section 14B. And this can add up really, really fast.
So a real motivator for companies to do the right thing, to get those payments in on time.
You bet. And it really highlights how seriously the government takes this. We're talking about people's financial security here, their ability to retire with dignity and have some comfort.
Wow, so this isn't just about picking boxes and filling out paperwork. There are real consequences for companies that mess around with those retirement savings.
Exactly. Actions have consequences.
Gives those audits some teeth, that's for sure. All right, so we've covered a ton of ground here. We've talked about the legal framework, those super specific details about tracking the finances.
We've done some deep diving.
We have. So where do we go from here? What's the last act in this whole auditing play?
Well, that's where the final set of annexures come in, K, L, and M. They're all about wrapping things up, making sure everyone's accountable, and basically closing the loop on the entire audit.
Okay, so we just spent a good chunk of time breaking down those first 10 annexures of this whole audit framework. And it's clear they really want to be thorough, like super thorough. But are they foolproof? Could there be some, I don't know, weaknesses, loopholes maybe, things that could actually put people's retirement savings at risk?
That's the big question, isn't it? I mean, these annexures, the regulations behind them, they create a pretty solid framework. I'll give them that.
They seem pretty solid.
But there are always risks, challenges, especially when you're talking about something as complex as managing money. It's not a perfect system.
Right. Okay, so let's play devil's advocate here. Even with all those checks and balances, all those rules, what are some ways the system could go wrong? What are some potential pitfalls?
Well, conflicts of interest, they're always going to be a concern. Even with all the safeguards, all the things they try to do to prevent it, remember, these trusts, they're managed by a board of trustees, and you've got people from both sides, the employer and the employee. And sure, there are those mechanisms to try and keep things impartial, but there's always that chance that what the company wants might end up being more important than what's best for the employees, especially when things get tough, economically speaking.
Yeah, I can see that. Like, if a company is struggling, really struggling financially, there's going to be a lot of pressure to focus on the short term, right? On quick wins, maybe even at the expense of those long-term retirement funds that employees are counting on. That's scary.
It's a valid concern, definitely. And that's why it's so important to be vigilant, to stay informed, ask questions, make sure those voices are being heard. Employees need to hold the company accountable, hold the trustees accountable.
So it's not enough to just trust the system. We have to actively participate in protecting our own money, our own financial futures.
But what about the government? What are they doing? Are they just letting companies manage all these retirement funds with barely any oversight?
Not at all. The government is very much involved. They're the ones setting the rules, making sure everyone's following them. They conduct inspections and force compliance. Remember those penalties in Annexure J? Those come straight from the government.
Right. Those are serious penalties, too.
Exactly. It's a deterrent, right? You don't want to mess around with those rules.
Makes sense. So it's not hands-off. The government is definitely making sure these trusts are following the law. But are those laws, are they changing? Are they evolving to keep up with new challenges, new risks? You bring up a good point. They're not set in stone, that's for sure. The government is constantly looking at these regulations, updating them. Things change, right? Economic conditions, new stuff happening in the industry, even advancements in financial tech. It's a dynamic process, always trying to make the system stronger, close those loopholes you mentioned before.
That's good to know. Sounds like they're taking this pretty seriously, understanding how important it is to protect those retirement savings.
Oh, absolutely. A country's retirement system, it's a big deal. It reflects how much they care about their citizens, their social welfare.
True. So let's switch gears a bit. What happens when someone doesn't follow the rules? We talked about those financial penalties for companies, but is there anything else? other consequences.
Oh, definitely. Not following those PF regulations can have some serious legal consequences. I mean, beyond just paying fines. You can have companies facing prosecution under the EPF Act, leading to even bigger fines and sometimes even, jail time for the people running the company.
Whoa. Okay, so they're not messing around. It's not just about hitting them the wallet.
It's about accountability. It's saying you were responsible for this and there are consequences.
Sends a strong message for sure.
And it shows that the government takes this seriously. They want to protect employees, make sure those funds are being handled the right way.
But it's more than just legal stuff too, right? There's also a company's reputation to think about.
Absolutely. This is huge these days. Corporate social responsibility, it's not just a buzzword, it's everything. And if a company gets a bad reputation for not taking care of its employees' provident fund, that news travels fast, hurts their image, makes it harder to attract good employees, keep the ones they have.
So it's actually good business to do the right thing. Not just legally, but ethically too.
Exactly. When a company manages the provident fund responsibly, everyone wins. Employees get their financial future protected, and the company, well, they get a better reputation. Helps them in the long run.
So we've established that compliance is crucial, not just legally, but ethically, and for a company's image. But let's zoom out a little. We've been talking about regulations, audits, all the details of these exempted PF trusts.
Yeah.
But this is all part of a bigger picture, right?
Of course. This whole decision, whether a company goes with the exempted PF trust or sticks with the government-run EPFO, it's complicated. Lots of factors involved.
So it's not as simple as just picking one or the other. Companies have to weigh their options, figure out what's best for them. What are some of the things they consider when making that decision?
Well, size matters. A big company, lots of resources, they might be totally fine managing their own funds. They could even get better returns, by tailoring their investment strategies.
Makes sense. They've got the people and the expertise to handle it.
Right. Smaller companies, they might prefer the simplicity of the EPFO. It's standardized, less for them to worry about.
So finding the right fit, considering their size, their resources. What about the type of industry? Does that make a difference?
Definitely can. Some industries have very specific requirements, unique investment opportunities maybe, that make an exempted PF trust more appealing.
And of course, the company's overall financial health, their long-term plans, those have to be major factors too, right?
Absolutely. They need to be certain, absolutely certain that they can manage these funds the right way, make sure they grow over time. It's a huge responsibility. You can't just jump into it lightly.
Sounds like this is a decision that requires a lot of planning, a lot of careful thought. It's a strategic choice, not just a box to check. It affects the employees, affects the company's future.
Right on. And it's not a decision that should be made in a vacuum. You want input from everyone involved. The employees, the management, financial experts, everyone needs to be on the same page.
And it shows how important transparency and communication are. Employees need to know what's happening, how those decisions are being made, and how it all impacts their retirement savings.
I completely agree. Empowering employees, making them active participants in their financial futures, that's key.
Couldn't agree more. Now, before we wrap this part up, I want to go back to something we talked about earlier. Those potential conflicts of interest with the Board of Trustees. We talked about safeguards, but are those always enough? Have there been times when those safeguards failed?
Unfortunately, yes. There have been cases where conflicts of interest led to, well, let's just say bad decisions. Funds being mishandled, decisions that put the company ahead of the employees. Those cases, they're harsh reminders of why we need to be vigilant, why accountability is so important.
Yeah, and those failures, they make the news. People lose trust in the whole system. It's like that saying, one bad apple can spoil the whole bunch.
That's true. But it's also important to remember that these systems, they're always evolving. They learn from those mistakes, try to improve. Each failure, it leads to them taking another look at the regulations, strengthening those safeguards. Hopefully, the system gets more resilient over time.
So it's like a constant process of learning and adapting, always trying to stay one step ahead of those risks, protecting those hard-earned savings.
Exactly. We know there are imperfections, but we keep working towards a system that's fair, that's secure, a good retirement system for everyone.
Love that perspective. Now, we've talked a lot about the challenges, the potential downsides of this system. But let's not forget that there can be benefits too, right? To having companies manage their own retirement funds.
Absolutely. One of the biggest pros is the potential for more customized investment strategies. With an exempted PF trust, you can create a portfolio that really aligns with the company's specific needs, their risk tolerance, their long-term goals. It's not just a generic approach.
So it's more tailored, potentially leading to better returns for those employees. That's a big plus.
It can be, for sure. And some people argue that these exempted PF trusts are more flexible, have lower administrative costs than the EPFO. The EPFO is a big system, can be a bit more bureaucratic.
So there are definitely pros and cons to both sides. It all comes down to doing the research, weighing those options, and making a decision that's right for that specific company.
Exactly. And employees, they need to understand these nuances too. Have those open discussions with their employers. Understand the why behind the decisions that are being made.
Knowledge is power, right?
Yeah.
The more employees know, the better choices they can make about their own financial future.
Couldn't have said it better myself. It's about creating that culture of transparency, collaboration, where the employer and the employee, they're both working together to create a retirement system that benefits everyone.
Love that. Well, I think this has been a really insightful discussion, hasn't it? It's complicated, it's nuanced. It's not just about saying one system is better than the other.
It's about understanding the complexities, seeing both sides, and making informed decisions.
Exactly. It's about going beyond the headlines, really understanding how these systems work, and acknowledging that it's an ongoing conversation, always evolving.
Well said.
So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, what's sticking with you? What's the big takeaway?
For me, it's about individual empowerment. It's easy to feel lost in all of this, to just assume that other people are looking out for us, taking care of everything.
Right. It's easy to just trust that our savings are safe and sound, not worry about the details.
But as we've seen, even with the best intentions, even with all those rules and safeguards, things can go wrong. So we have to be proactive, understand our own retirement plans, ask questions, hold people accountable.
Take ownership. Be in the driver's seat.
Exactly. Be informed, be engaged, be proactive. Demand transparency, keep learning, and make choices that are right for you, for your long-term goals.
That's a great message for everyone listening. We can't just sit back and hope for the best. We have to actively shape our own financial futures.
Absolutely. It's about taking control, building the future you want.
Love it. Well, on that note, I think it's time to move on to the last part of our deep dive. We've covered a lot, but there's still more to explore.
Definitely. We've gone deep on these exempted PF trusts in India, but this isn't just an India thing. This is global. Retirement, how we save for it, it's something every country is dealing with.
That's a really interesting point. You're saying that these challenges, these opportunities, they're happening everywhere, not just here.
Exactly. Every country is trying to figure out how to make sure their citizens have a good retirement, that they're financially secure. The specific systems, the rules might be different, but the goal is the same.
So this is a much bigger conversation, a global one.
Exactly. And as we go into this last part of our deep dive, I want everyone listening to think bigger. Look beyond India. See what other countries are doing. What's working, what's not. What can we learn from them?
Love that challenge. Turn this deep dive into a springboard for even more exploration.
Exactly. Who knows, maybe you'll find an idea, a solution that could work here in India. The best innovations, they often come from looking at what other people are doing, from being willing to learn.
Well said. All right, on that note, let's wrap up this part of our discussion.
Sounds good to me. Excited to hear what you've been thinking about as we bring this to a close.
Okay, so we've been on this deep dive now into, let's be honest, a pretty complex world of exempted provident fund trusts. We've gone through all the rules, the auditing, the good, the bad, but I keep coming back to this question. What does it all mean for, the average person, someone like me who's just trying to, figure out retirement, make sure they're set for the future?
That's a great question, and honestly, it's the one every single listener should be asking themselves right now. Because understanding these systems, it's not about becoming some kind of financial whiz overnight.
No, definitely not.
It's about, being a smarter participant in your own financial life, taking control.
Right, so it's not about memorizing all these annexures, all the tiny details. It's about understanding how it all works. What are our rights? What questions should we be asking?
Exactly. You don't need to know how to rebuild an engine to drive a car, right?
No, thank goodness.
But you do need to know the basics. Check the oil, change a tire, when to take it in for a tune-up.
I like that. Empowering people to make good decisions, even if they're not, experts.
Exactly. And when it comes to retirement, to those savings, knowledge, that's your superpower. Start with the basics. What is a provident fund, really? How does it work? What kinds of schemes are out there?
So lay that foundation first. And once you've got that, then you can start asking the right questions. Whether your company uses the EPFO or has that exempted PF trust, be proactive. Don't be shy.
Ask your employer for a breakdown of your contributions. Where's that money going? How's it being invested? What are the fees?
And remember, if your company has that exempted PF trust, you've got the right to be represented on that board of trustees. Make your voice heard.
Yes, absolutely. And don't be afraid to get some help if you need it. Talk to a financial advisor, someone who specializes in retirement planning. There's tons of info online too.
So many resources out there, websites, blogs, even podcasts like ours, all dedicated to helping people make sense of retirement planning, figuring out those investment strategies.
Don't get overwhelmed though. It's a lot, I know. Just start small. Focus on what applies to you, to your situation. You don't have to learn it all at once.
Take it step by step. The more you know, the more confident you'll feel about planning for the future.
Exactly. Now, as we're wrapping up, I want to leave everyone with one last thought. We've been talking about India, about these exempted PF trusts, but this goes way beyond India.
Right, retirement, it's a global issue.
It is. Every country is trying to solve this problem. How do we make sure people have a good retirement? How do we make sure they're financially secure?
So what can we learn from what other countries are doing? Are there ideas we can borrow, things that are working really well somewhere else?
Oh, definitely. It shows us that we need to think creatively. There's not just one right way to do this. We have to look at what's working in other places, learn from their successes and even their failures.
So this isn't just an Indian conversation, it's a global one. We're all connected, trying to figure this out together.
That's right. So as you think about your own retirement, keep that in mind. Do some research. What are other countries doing? What are some different approaches? What can we learn from them here in India?
That's a great challenge for everyone listening. Don't stop here. Keep learning. Keep exploring.
Maybe your research will even lead to some brand new ideas, solutions that could change things, not just in India, but all over the world.
That's a great point. All right, so on that note, let's wrap up this episode of The Deep Dive. We've been through a lot, the ins and outs of exempted PF trusts, the rules, the challenges, the possibilities.
It's been a great conversation. I'm so glad we got to share this with everyone listening.
And to everyone who joined us today, thank you. We hope you learned something new, maybe got a little inspired to take charge of your financial future. And until next time, keep learning, keep questioning, keep diving deep. All right, so get ready. We're diving deep into some serious financial territory. You sent us some tables and annexures, and it looks like we're going to be taking a close look at an employee provident fund trust.
Oh yeah, these reports, they might seem a little intimidating at first glance, but honestly, they're packed with really valuable insights.
Yeah, it's like getting a behind-the-scenes look at how your retirement savings are being managed, where they're being invested, how those investments are performing, and ultimately how it all affects your financial well-being down the line.
Exactly.
So for those of you listening who maybe need a little refresher on the whole Provident Fund thing, let's start with the basics. What exactly IAS, an Employee Provident Fund Trust, and why should we even care about these reports?
Okay, so in the simplest terms, a Provident Fund Trust, it's basically like a big collective savings pool, right? It helps you build a nest egg for retirement.
Yeah.
You, the employee, you contribute a portion of your salary. And your employer, they match that contribution. And then all that money is managed by the trust. They invest it in various things with the goal of growing your savings over time.
So it's kind of like a mandatory savings plan,
Right.
but with a little bonus from your employer. Not bad. But what makes these reports so important?
Well, these reports are really all about transparency and accountability, They give you, the member, a detailed view of how the trust is handling your money.
I like that.
Everything from the interest rates they're declaring to the specific investments they're making, even how they deal with claims and unclaimed funds. It's your right to know where your money's going and how it's being managed.
Absolutely. Transparency is key, especially when it comes to something as important as our retirement savings. So let's start unpacking these annexures. First up, annexures N and O, which focus on claims and advances. What can you tell us about those?
These are the ones that are really relevant to individual members. Think of them as like personalized records.
Okay.
Annexure N specifically deals with claims, like retirement withdrawals, death benefits, maybe even disability claims. It lists things like the claim IDs, the member names, and the types of claims filed.
So if you were a member of this specific fund, you could actually find your own claim ID in this annexure and see what's happening with it.
Exactly. It's a way for members to track the status of their claims, make sure everything's being processed correctly. Annexure O, that one focuses more on advances.
Right.
Partial withdrawals that members can make from their Provident Fund account for things like medical emergencies, housing needs, maybe education expenses.
Oh, so it's like having a safety net within your retirement savings.
Yeah, exactly. If you hit a rough patch and you need some cash, you can apply for an advance.
Pretty useful. But Annexure O, it doesn't just list these advances, does it?
Nope. It gives details about the types of advances requested, the amounts involved, and whether there have been any deviations from the standard procedures, just for transparency.
I see. Keeps everything above board. Okay, so we've got claims and advances covered. Two really important things for individual members. Now let's move on to something everyone loves: interest. Annexure P is where we get into the nitty-gritty of interest rates and how they're affecting the growth of those savings.
Absolutely. Interest is really like the engine. It drives the growth of your Provident Fund.
Right.
The higher the interest rate, the faster your savings multiply. So Annexure P starts off by showing us the interest rate declared by the trust for the year. This is the big number. It directly impacts how much your savings will grow.
Yeah, for sure. And we can compare this rate to previous years, see if it's trending up or down. That gives us a sense of how well the trust is doing, right? Whether our savings are on track. But Annexure P also shows us something else that's pretty important: the possibility of a shortfall.
Right, a shortfall. That happens when the interest that should be credited to the members' accounts, it exceeds the actual income earned by the trust.
Okay, so like they promised a certain rate of return, but they didn't quite hit that mark. Why does that happen?
Well, there are a few reasons. Sometimes it's just market fluctuations, The value of investments can go up and down, and that impacts the income generated. Other times, there might be delays in receiving interest payments from some investments. Annexure P usually gives you the details behind the shortfall.
And that's where things get interesting, right? Because Annexure P doesn't just tell us about the shortfall, it also tells us how the trust is making up for it. Did they have to dip into their reserves, sell some investments, pull a rabbit out of a hat?
Well, hopefully no rabbits. But you're right. Annexure P should tell us where those funds came from. And that tells us a lot about how they're managing the money. Are they being cautious, drawing from reserves? Or are they maybe taking actions that could have some long-term consequences? It's all about understanding the bigger picture.
Right. We're starting to see how these reports, even something like Annexure P, can reveal a lot about the trust's decisions. And we're just getting started.
Exactly. We've got a bunch more to explore, each one shedding light on a different aspect of the trust's operations.
Awesome. Up next, we'll be diving into the world of investments. We'll uncover the strategies the trust is using to try and grow your savings. Stay tuned.
Don't go anywhere.
Okay, so deep divers, let's roll up our sleeves and dig into the real meat of this Employee Provident Fund Trust. It's all about their investment strategies.
Yeah, right.
We've gotten a taste already, haven't we? With claims, interest rates, all those potential shortfalls. But now it's time to really see how this trust is putting your money to work.
Yeah. And to guide us on this exciting journey, we've got annexures Q, R, and S.
Sounds like a plan.
These three, they work together. They paint a really comprehensive picture of the trust's investment activity, not only showing us where they're investing, but also how those investments are actually performing.
Oh, that's good to know.
And are they actually following the rules, The ones designed to protect your savings. That's what we're going to find out.
Yeah, good point. So, Annexure Q, that seems to be all about the investment surplus. What is that exactly? Is it just extra cash they have lying around that they haven't invested yet?
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it. It's funds that the trust has received, but hasn't put into their investment portfolio just yet.
Interesting.
Could be contributions from members, employers, or even income from investments they already have.
So it's kind of like, having money just sitting in a checking account instead of earning interest or growing through investments. Doesn't that seem like a missed opportunity?
You're right. You're absolutely right. The whole idea is to keep that money working hard, and any delays in investing that surplus, that means potentially lost returns. And that's why Annexure Q is so important. It tells us if there have been any delays and why.
Oh, I see. Yeah. So what kind of reasons might we find there? Are we talking just like the trust is taking their sweet time making decisions, or could there be, legitimate reasons for the delays?
Well, there are definitely valid reasons sometimes. It could be about timing the market,
Right.
Maybe they're waiting for a better moment to get in to maximize those returns. or maybe there are some regulatory hurdles they need to jump through, or due diligence before they commit to an investment.
But I mean, delays can really make a difference, right? The longer money sits idle, the less potential it has to grow for the members. So I'm guessing there are probably some rules in place to discourage that kind of thing.
Exactly. Regulations usually have provisions about investing the surplus in a timely manner, and that's where a surcharge comes in.
Oh, okay.
If they don't invest the surplus within a specific time frame, they might have to pay a penalty, a little financial nudge to make sure they're investing promptly and efficiently.
So Annexure Q, it not only tells us about the surplus and any delays, but also if they had to pay any surcharge payments because of it.
Yep, exactly.
Like a financial report card.
That's a great way to put it. Speaking of financial reports, let's check out Annexure R. This one dives into the trust's income and expenses. It gives us a glimpse into their overall financial health.
Right, so if Annexure Q was the report card for investments, this one's like their profit and loss statement, right?
Yeah, got it.
We see where the money is coming from and where it's going.
Exactly. Annexure R breaks down all their income streams, things like contributions from members, employers, income generated from investments.
Makes sense.
And on the expense side, we see things like administrative costs, fees for managing investments, any other operational expenses.
Right. Is there anything in particular we should be looking for in this Annexure R?
Oh, absolutely. The fresh accretion, that's a key figure.
Okay, what's that?
It represents the net increase in the trust's funds during the year. Basically, it's the amount their assets have grown after accounting for all the income and expenses. Think of it like their bottom line.
Oh, I see. So like a measure of their financial fitness.
Right.
But let's be honest, the really exciting part is seeing how they're actually investing the funds. And that's where Annexure S comes in, right? This is where we get to see their investment strategy in action.
You got it. Annexure S, this is where the rubber meets the road. It shows how the trust's investment portfolio is spread across different types of assets.
Okay.
We're talking government securities, debt instruments, equities, sometimes even real estate, that sort of thing.
So it's like peeking into their playbook, seeing what bets they're making with our retirement savings. But I imagine there are rules about how they can allocate those funds, right? They can't just go all in on risky investments and hope for the best.
Definitely not. Provident fund trusts have to follow regulations, and those regulations specify how much they can invest in each asset class. It's all about finding a balance, risk versus return, protecting the savings, but also allowing them to grow.
So Annexure S tells us if they're playing by the rules, sticking to those prescribed norms.
Exactly. We can see if they're being conservative, putting money into government bonds, or if they're taking on more risk with stocks.
That's interesting. And what about those surcharge provisions? Do those apply here too if they stray too far from the norms?
You bet. Annexure S would show any surcharge implications, making sure they're accountable and encouraging them to make informed decisions.
So we've gone from a broad view of their financial health to a really detailed look at their investment strategies. It's pretty amazing how these annexures work together, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's like a puzzle, and each piece helps us understand the bigger picture.
Welcome back, deep divers. We are in the home stretch now of our deep dive into this Employee Provident Fund Trust. And you know what? We're about to uncover some details that might just surprise you. We've looked at how the trust manages their investments in general, but now we're going to zoom in, look at the specific securities they're holding, and then we're going to explore this whole world of unclaimed funds. It'll be like financial detective work.
I like that. Detective work. It's a perfect way to describe it. Annexures T and U, those are like financial fingerprints, showing us the specific securities in the trust's portfolio. And then we'll move on to X and Y, which, they deal with those unclaimed funds. Often overlooked, but very interesting.
Okay, so Annexures T and U, they basically give us an itemized list of all the different securities that the trust is invested in, right? Like we're peeking into their vaults, seeing what treasures they're holding.
Exactly. Annexure T, it breaks down each security, gives you all the details.
Nice.
You've got the ISIN, that's the unique identification number, the purchase date, the face value, the cost price, maturity date, even when those coupon payments are due.
Okay, I'm hearing a lot of financial terms here. ISIN, face value, coupon payments. Can we break those down a little bit for our listeners who might not be familiar with all that jargon?
Of course. ISIN, think of it like a social security number for a security.
Okay, yeah.
It's a unique code, identifies that specific bond or stock. Face value, that's how much it'll be worth when it matures, like the sticker price. And coupon payments, those are the interest payments that the issuer makes to the holder, periodically, of course.
So it's like receiving rent payments, but for a financial instrument.
You got it. Those coupon payments, they're a steady stream of income for the trust. But sometimes those payments, they don't arrive on time.
Oh, no.
And that's where Annexure U comes in. Overdue interest, that's what it's all about. Any interest payments that haven't been received by the trust when they were supposed to?
Like a tenant who's late on their rent.
Yeah.
I'm guessing the trust doesn't just let that slide.
Definitely not. Annexure U, it outlines the whole recovery process. Have they filed any claims with the issuers of those securities? It's about making sure the trust is actively managing those investments, protecting its members.
All right, let's shift gears a little bit. Let's talk about the people behind all these numbers, the employees.
Right.
Annexure W, this one gives us a peek into the demographics of the workforce covered by this Provident Fund Trust. I always find this part really fascinating, seeing the human side of all these financial reports.
I agree. Annexure W, it tells us about the individual employees. Their names, their UANs, those are unique account numbers, dates of joining, leaving the organization, even their nationality.
Wait, nationality. Does that mean there are international employees contributing to this fund? That seems like it could get complicated, managing contributions for people working in different countries, maybe different rules.
You're right, it can get tricky. Annexure W might give us some clues about how they're handling it. It also shows whether contributions are being paid according to the scheme rules, which is super important.
Absolutely. Even with a mandatory plan, there can be slip-ups, right?
Yeah.
Maybe employers delay or miss contributions. Annexure W, it's like a watchdog, making sure everyone's playing fair.
I like that analogy.
Yeah.
Now, let's move on to something a little bit different, a topic that's always, kind of intriguing, unclaimed funds.
Oh, yes. This is interesting.
Annexures X and Y, these shine a light on money that's just sitting there waiting to be claimed.
It's like a financial treasure hunt. Are we talking about long-lost inheritances, or is it more like smaller amounts people have forgotten about?
Well, it can be both, honestly. Sometimes it's a big chunk of change that's been unclaimed for years. Maybe the beneficiary moved, lost track of their account. Other times, it's just smaller amounts that fell through the cracks. But big or small, those funds need to get back to their rightful owners.
Yeah, right. Of course. So what happens to these unclaimed funds? Do they just sit there forever? Or is there a way to claim them?
So Annexure X, this one shows us the total unclaimed amount at the beginning of the year, at the end of the year, and how much was added, how much was claimed, and how much was, transferred out.
Transferred. Where does it go?
Well, after a certain amount of time, those unclaimed funds, they're typically transferred to the Senior Citizens Welfare Fund. That's the SCWF. It's a way to make sure those funds are used for good, even if the original owner can't be found. Annexure Y, that gives us more specifics on that process, how much was transferred, any reasons for delays.
So even if someone loses track of their savings, that money might still end up helping someone in need. That's actually kind of a nice thought.
It is, and it really highlights why it's important to stay informed about your account. Make sure your contact info is up to date. You never know, there might be some unclaimed funds out there with your name on them.
Wow, we really have covered a lot of ground today, haven't we? From understanding claims and advances to breaking down investment strategies to uncovering these mysteries of unclaimed funds, we've really gone deep. And I think we have a much better understanding now of how all of this affects our retirement savings.
That's exactly right. It's all about giving you the tools to be an informed participant in your own financial future. These reports, they're more than just numbers. They tell a story about how your money is being managed, how it's working to secure your future.
So the next time you see one of these reports, don't just toss it aside. Take some time, dig into those details, ask some questions, make sure your savings are on the right path. Knowledge is power, especially when it comes to your finances.
Absolutely.
Keep learning, keep exploring, keep that curiosity burning. That's what the deep dive is all about. Until next time.
See you then.